Good morning, everyone. Secretary Redu, will you call the roll, please?
Regent Bartel.
Here.
Regent Bradley.
Here.
Regent Crane.
Here.
Regent Danae Davis. Regent Stan Davis. Regent Drew.
Here.
Regent Evers.
Here.
Regent Falbo.
Here.
Regent Loftus.
Here.
Regent Manydeeds.
Here.
Regent Pruitt.
Here.
Regent Schwallenberg.
Here.
Regent Smith.
Here.
Regent Spector. Regent Vasquez.
Here.
Regent Walsh.
Here.
Regent Wingad.
Here.
Regent Womack.
Here.
A quorum is present.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
It is my pleasure to begin by introducing our newest board member, Student Regent Jessica Schwallenberg. Jessica is replacing Kevin Opkennorth as the non-traditional student on our board. She has just completed her associate's degree with honors at UW-Milwaukee, and she plans to attend UW-Milwaukee this fall to continue her coursework for her psychology major.
Just a little behind.
Why do I feel we're off? Jessica has held several leadership positions on the Waukesha campus, including student ambassador, orientation leader, pre-college mentor, and tutor. She also served as president of the Ecology Club and secretary for the UW-Waukesha chapter of Phi Theta Kappa. Jessica and her son Elliot live in Delafield. Adding another important perspective to our board deliberations, she'll represent the diverse interests of many UW stakeholders, including non-traditional students with family and work obligations. Jessica, welcome to the Board of Regents. And just to break you in gently, your first official duty on the job will be setting next year's tuition. Thank you. Welcome aboard. To help us all ease into this agenda, we'll start with a presentation from our host institution, UW-Milwaukee. If there's one thing we have learned during our recent Regents meetings here, it is that the Chancellor rarely comes before us alone. 2 years ago, we heard from two very sincere supporters of this university, Milwaukee Mayor Tom Barrett and philanthropist Joseph Silver, whose generosity will live on for generations to come. Last year, we had the opportunity to meet 4 outstanding UWM students who shared their experience in carrying out the research mission of this outstanding institution. And in keeping with tradition, the Chancellor has brought some other folks along this time and has organized some very special guests to come with him to tell us the UWM story. Will you all please welcome Chancellor Carlos Santiago.
I get a sense from those last comments that I need somebody to watch my back. Welcome all of you to the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee and the city of Milwaukee. We're delighted that you're here. It's a beautiful day, and we know the agenda is very busy. My binder is twice the size that it regularly is, so there's a lot of important deliberations that will go on. You can tell from the title of the presentation that it is really a 3-part presentation, and I will begin making some comments around some of the metrics that are associated with a doctoral research campus, and really look, as I complete my 6th year at this fine institution, look at some of the things that we have focused on and we've tried to improve over time. Secondly, I will ask representatives of the firm Lippman Hearn to come forward, and they will see if the changes that have been occurring on this campus have been translated into different perspectives on the campus from a wide variety of constituent groups. And finally, in terms of presidents, I've asked 2 former presidents of the Board of Regents to give their perspective on higher education, and as I talked to them about what they might speak about, I said, you can talk about anything you want. And I guess that's one of the prerogatives of being a former president of the Board of Regents. The first metric that I will talk a little bit about will be research expenditures, and clearly as as a doctoral research campus. Research expenditures is an important measure of progress at the institution. We are part of the doctoral cluster within the UW system. We share it with our sister institution in Madison. And our goal, our aspiration, is to become a premier urban research university. I will talk about enrollment and where enrollment is going on the campus and how the institution fits within the larger objectives of the Board of Regents and its goal to increase the number of graduates in the state of Wisconsin. I will talk about online capability, which is very important to this campus as a campus that's constrained in many respects by space. Online and distance education have become very important to our pedagogy and our performance, and I'll give you some metrics on that, and clearly indicating that we are aligned with the UW system eCampus initiative. I'll talk about access and diversity, which is very important to this campus. We take it as one of the missions of the institution is to be a research university, but provide access as one would in an urban context. And we'll talk a little bit about progress in that area. We'll talk about retention, which clearly, as we look to graduate more students in this region and in this part of the state for the benefit of the state, clearly graduation rates need to go up, and that needs to be moved forward by improvements in retention as well. We'll talk about doctoral students. The numbers of doctoral students graduating is also a sign of a doctoral research university. We will refer to residence halls that have become increasingly important for this campus as it has changed from a largely commuter institution to now a residential university. And I will also make some commentary about some of our initiatives regarding expansion of the campus's east side footprint. First, with respect to research, research expenditures is the main metric that is often used to gauge progress as a research university. We have made significant progress with a wide variety of programs, both internal reallocation through the Research Growth Initiative, through external investments such as the Catalyst grants. We anticipate by the end of this fiscal year we will have surpassed $60 million. We have barely a month to go, but already the numbers have tracked above 60, so we expect to be well on our way to achieving the goal that we had set out when I started, which is $100 million worth of research. That, from my perspective, is a goal that is achievable at this institution, and I think at the rate we're going, we will certainly reach that particular level. Enrollment has certainly been growing on this campus at an extremely rapid rate. Over the past decade, we've added 6,502 students to our campus, which is about a 27% enrollment growth without expansion in physical land or space. It certainly has been a challenge. In comparison, enrollment growth across the rest of the system has been about 8%. I use and sometimes tease my colleague Tom Harden at UW Green Bay that we have, over that last decade, absorbed basically the equivalent of, where's Tom? There he is, of Green Bay. And I say that with a great degree of envy, because as I go to his campus and I see the beautiful expanse of land that he has and the number of students, they have 6 students per acre compared to our 340 students per acre. It certainly is a wonderful situation for him, and maybe we do a mini campus over in Green Bay. If you lend us some land, we might do that. But yeah. Clearly, enrollment growth and keeping the doors open has been one of the things that we have kept at the forefront of what we're doing. If you look at the the growth agenda for the state that the system is putting forward, clearly UWM has an important role to play in reaching those goals. One of the ways we've been able to reach students increasingly is our online learning, which is the fastest growing segment of our pedagogy. We have more than 6,600 students who have taken at least one online class. We have 1,259 who took online classes exclusively. We reach all parts of the state and beyond. We, with the help of the Sloan Foundation, a grant from the Sloan Foundation, now have a full general education curriculum that is online, and you can have up to, we have 7, and hopefully there will be approval for an 8th undergraduate major that can be taken exclusively online. We have a full online doctorate in nursing as well. We see this as the future for our campus, and we're very proud of the way online education has grown on this campus. It really has grown for the interest and focus of the faculty. It has not been a top-down kind of solution. I've never come in and said our goal is to increase online education by X number of students. It really has worked from the bottom up, and if you look at the most successful online delivery programs, that's the way they work. It really is due to the support that the faculty receive and the encouragement that they receive to move that education forward. Diversity is part of our access mission as well. And we have increased diversity on this campus. The percentage of students of color have gone up. I had set a goal for our freshman class when I first arrived that we should be at 20%, no less than 20% students of color. We are currently at I believe 18% in terms of our freshman class for last year. For this year, for this coming fall, we expect to surpass the 20% students of color. We have done that in an environment where we have stabilized the freshman class, kept the freshman class relatively constant, yet increased the diversity, and that's been our goal all along. We've done that through a variety of mechanisms, including messages within various communities. More scholarship money has also been applied to this. We've been retaining students at higher rates. Our retention rates for all students has gone up from 69 to 73%. We're particularly pleased that retention rates among students of color have gone up 10 percentage points in that same time, closing the gap. There is much more work that needs to be done on retention and graduation rates. We've put in a number of programs, largely within the umbrella of what we call Access to Success, and we're beginning to see some positive gains. One of the real success stories, I believe, is our doctoral programs. Our doctoral program array, when I arrived, had 19 doctoral programs. I recall at the time this board actually made a significant difference in how doctoral programs were perceived at UWM. There was a time I was told when the only way UWM could have a doctoral program is if it did not already exist at Madison, and you should know Madison had 114 doctoral programs, or if it could exist if it had the term urban appended to it. And I recall, and I may have mentioned this before, that it was Chancellor John Wiley from UW-Madison who, before the board a number of years ago, stood up and as a physicist he said, there is no such thing as urban physics. You need to open the doors for UWM to get doctoral programs, even the same ones that exist at Madison. And we have done so. I've always said that the goal for this campus, a campus of this size, should be around 32 to 35 doctoral programs. We are well on our way. We have 29 doctoral programs. There will be a few doctoral programs before you today, one in sociology, another one in freshwater sciences, and you will be seeing in the coming months doctoral programs coming from the area of public health as well. I think what is remarkable about this is really the number of doctoral students that we are graduating. That is a figure that is an important metric for a doctoral research campus, and if you look at the data, we've pretty much doubled the number of doctoral students at this campus is graduating, and I think that certainly is a testimony to the faculty and staff that have worked hard to prepare the programs, to admit the students, to get the kind of funding sources that they need to be successful and to help them through. If you compare our institution with other doctoral research institutions across the nation, you will see that our doctoral growth, albeit from a relatively small base, has been fairly significant compared to other research universities, and we think that's part of our evolution. That's part of our strategy as well. As we have become more of a residential campus, we realize the need for student spaces, good student spaces. Today we will have an event, I believe at 4 o'clock at Riverview, which is the residence hall that came online a year ago. It's been very successful. From that facility, you will see across the river, you will see the newest facility, which is a 700-bed facility that we're very proud of. It's called Cambridge Commons. We know that these residential facilities are hugely important in our strategy to increase retention, to increase graduation rates, and to get students more involved in the life of the university. Clearly, in the last few months, with the legislature's support, Governor Doyle signed SB 514 that provided, with the guidance of this board, a number of capital projects that are hugely important to this campus, and we're appreciative not only to the board and to the UW system for their support, but also the many constituent groups that stood up and said this campus needs to expand. It needs to be able to have new and better facilities. We have now, with funding for the build-out of the current freshwater sciences site on Greenfield Avenue, we have $50 million that will be used to expand and renovate that particular facility. There will be $75 million that will be applied to the interdisciplinary research building, which is a building on this campus that will be a huge addition to our research initiative. We have certainly the authorization to expend gift money on a new research vessel as well, and we look forward to moving that project forward. And we certainly have as a high priority the acquisition of Columbia St. Mary's. That is really the last parcel that's available to this campus. It's exceptionally important that we acquire that property. I know the faculty are working diligently on deciding not only what we put on that particular parcel, but how we can make the financial model work to support that parcel. There are other initiatives that are ongoing. One certainly is to expand fresh water into multiple locations, the second location being at Reed Street Yards, which is an area that would satisfy both the facility for the administrative headquarters of the new School of Freshwater Sciences, as well as a number of other applied initiatives. Our intent to continue to seek, and we have received the approvals, but we have not finally raised the money to acquire a 72-acre parcel in Wauwatosa, but that is continuing to move forward. I see that as part of the wider future of this campus, as is the conversations that we're having around location of the School of Public Health, and it's no mystery of what my preference has been, is that I think that School of Public Health needs to be located downtown in Milwaukee, co-located with a number of other related entities as well. So, in summary, I think we have moved forward the agenda that was given to me when I became part of this system. The board was very clear. They told me, we want you to help build that premier urban research university and do all you can to do that. We've received the support of this board all along, and we're very, very appreciative. But none of this would have happened without the efforts of our faculty, staff, and students. They are the ones that build the programs. They are the ones that mentor the students. They are the ones that do the grant applications and get the research funds to move this campus forward. So I'd be remiss if I did not acknowledge their efforts in making sure that this agenda moved forward. I would now like to turn the meeting over to Tom Lujak, who will talk a bit about some of the changing perceptions of UWM over the last 4 years. Tom? Tom is our Vice Chancellor for Public Relations.
Thank you, Carlos, and good morning, everybody. As a public doctoral research university, we're accustomed here on campus to the careful gathering and analysis of data in the many research initiatives conducted by our faculty, staff, and students. Well, 4 years ago, with the support of the UWM Foundation, the university committed to a rigorous market analysis of the institution's standing in the community. The result was the first detailed picture of how key constituent groups viewed UWM as we embarked on realizing the Chancellor's vision for building our research capacity while still remaining an institution accessible to the diverse populations that we serve. In addition to establishing benchmarks for studying public perception, the research served as a foundation for the development of our Something Great in Mind branding campaign, something that you've seen in various incarnations over the last few years that you have visited our campus. That campaign was used in our $125 million capital fundraising program called the Campaign for UWM. Aspirational in nature, Something Great in Mind has showcased our faculty and our student researchers and the fine work that they do. The marketing campaign was built on the premise that our community has high expectations for how UWM needs to contribute to the region. It also supported our student recruitment marketing efforts, which last year added the Awesome Affordable tagline to our market advertising. This spring, we decided to go back into the field to measure how well Something Great in Mind has worked and how the public views UWM and our research agenda today, 4 years after we started this program. Joining us now are Donna Vandewater and Tom Abramson from the Littman-Hearn Agency. We've been working together with them for the last 4 years on our branding and student recruitment programs, and as you can see, they have extensive experience working with colleges and universities, not just here in this country, but literally around the world, with more than 300 universities and colleges that they've worked with. We're very happy that they've been working on the UWM brand, and we're going to hear about how well we've moved the needle over these last few years.
Thank you, Tom. Good morning, everyone. The goals of our most recent research initiative linked very closely to the goals that we had in 2006. We've wanted to assess the marketplace position of UWM, both its image and its brand identity among its key audiences. We also very much needed to use this information to inform the next generation marketing campaign. As you might imagine, these things do need to be refreshed over time. We wanted to determine what messages we need to be putting out there to our different audiences, and we wanted to see where we've made progress and where we need to still do more work. We used a mixed methodology approach in our research, conducting focus groups with high school guidance counselors, parents of college-bound high school seniors, and the representatives from the Milwaukee business and community leaders. These were all done in the Milwaukee area. We also fielded 4 different surveys. All of the surveys were conducted in collaboration with UWM Center for Urban Initiatives and Research, and their professional and student staff conducted the telephone interviews and administered the online surveys to currently enrolled undergraduate students and graduate students as well. We, Littman-Hearn, conducted all of the analyses and all of the interpretation. Taking what I would call the 20,000-foot flyover and looking at our findings, we see that from 2006 to 2010, our awareness indicators did hold constant, but we were nearing 100% anyway, so we really didn't have anywhere to move. But more importantly, we saw significant improvement across key reputation and affiliation drivers, which I'll talk a little bit more about in just a moment. Awareness for the goal for UWM to be seen as a premier research university was up across all audiences. So understanding of that has grown dramatically. In the focus groups, we also heard much about the freshwater campus and public health, again, sort of understanding and recognition of what this means for the area. Importantly, and as we heard the Chancellor talk about earlier, all audiences also believe and understand that UWM does indeed have a diverse student body. Compared to 2006, we heard much in our 2010 focus groups about awareness of minority student comfort on this campus. The groups also suggested to us that the university is recognized out in the community as being proactive about recruiting students of color and providing resources and support for students in need. The marketing and communications investment also appears to have moved the needle regarding research and quality at the undergraduate level. Prospective student perceptions of UWM have improved across the board, and in some cases, as you'll see later, quite dramatically. Although, I think we always have to remember that, very importantly, for many, enrollment decisions are still based on the cost-value equation. And then finally, we found that between 40 and 60%, substantial proportions of those surveyed believe that UWM is a positive force in the local community. Focus group participants, especially those business and community leaders, recognize that UWM is a very important player in the economy of this region. Among our prospective student survey participants between 2006 and 2010, we saw very important movement, as I mentioned before. We saw significant increases in ratings related to faculty instruction, both teaching as well as faculty concern and care for students. We saw research, both the quality of faculty research and the innovative partnerships with business, recognition of that also go up. And finally, we also saw reputation, as measured by just general overall reputations, move up, belief that UWM graduates get the jobs that they want, and that this is becoming an increasingly selective institution, that the quality of their peers is also increasing. I'm going to very quickly share just a few key charts that illustrate the momentum that this institution has seen in three key areas. These figures highlight findings from the 2010 research. The brighter color bars at the end up there show the increase, the progression we've seen between 2006 and 2010. I'm going to just ask my colleague Tom to step up here, Tom Abrahamson, to step up here and comment on this particular slide from his perspective as a former dean of admission and a consultant on enrollment management for over 100 colleges.
Good morning. Thank you, Donna. UWM's growth in research activity between 2006 and 2010 and its high level of engagement with every key constituent is evident in this chart. A particular note is the top bar, and we did triple check our data on this one, is the astounding increase in understanding among UWM's prospects that faculty conducts high-quality research. This finding is especially satisfying because it speaks to the core of UWM's academic enterprise and strategic priorities. We found that in our research with prospective students nationwide that students are very savvy consumers. They investigate colleges with as much or more rigor than many of us in this room vetted our own graduate and professional programs. They're becoming more keenly aware of the importance of faculty research and faculty mentorship activities with undergraduates.
I mentioned before awareness and understanding about the diversity of the student body here. This chart just again shows very large proportions of our various audiences understanding and recognizing the diversity of the student body here. Again, very important for this institution. Tom's going to come back and just take us through a couple more points.
Okay, thank you. What I'd like to do is just provide a little bit of market context on this work. We work with many urban and public universities around the nation, and this has helped inform our work with UWM over the past 4 years. What I'd like to do is put this in context with what has happened in the state and across the nation during the last decade. I'll also touch a bit on the economy's effect on college choice and student expectations, and share some of the challenges we'll face in the years ahead. As you can see here, over the last 10 years, nationwide, 4-year public college enrollment has risen 19%. As Chancellor Santiago mentioned at the outset in his remarks, UWM's enrollment has increased at a much greater pace, 27%, during the last 10 years. This compares to about 8% overall system-wide, and then looking just at the University of Wisconsin's comprehensive universities, excluding UW-Milwaukee and UW-Madison in the data, enrollment has increased about 10% during the last 10 years. The recession has had a dramatic impact on the way students choose a college. It has many institutions in a bit of a tizzy right now. Recent national studies have found that 67% of students were influenced by the economy in choosing a college. And sadly, 1 in 5 indicated that a parent had lost a job during this recession. 33% of students applied to more schools than the prior year's group, and 28% of them looked to attend college closer to home than in 2009. On that last point, and on the surface, this last finding is a positive trend for public institutions. And as you're aware, community colleges in particular have been the greatest beneficiaries. They're bursting at the seams. In terms of some quality sorts, in spite of this trend to look more locally, high school seniors with 3.5 or greater GPAs were more prone this year to consider a private college, 38% of them compared to 29% in 2008. In the research we did with UWM, this chart shows that 4 out of these 5 highest rated factors that influence college choice were related to money and value. It is for this reason that we developed the headline Awesome Affordable and the campaign to support UWM's enrollment marketing during the height of the recession. Students and families understand that college is an investment, and they're choosing a college with tremendous scrutiny, seeking to understand value for the dollar. They're familiar with sticker price and net price. They seek recognition in the form of academic scholarships for their accomplishments. And they're also presented with all kinds of other discounts, such as housing scholarships. Despite all this focus on money, we were heartened to see that the second most important factor, climate of respect and inclusion, which is a very high value of UWM, was in contention with money matters as the second most important factor in prospective students' selection criteria. Looking ahead to the next 10 years, this will not be a cakewalk. Projections of high school graduates nationwide, and these are based on live births and expected graduation rates, are expected to decline more than 6% in the next 10 years. Thus, to grow traditional student enrollment means first filling a 6% deficit before any real growth can occur. And many institutions are looking to widen their net geographically in their recruitment, increasing enrollment of adults, online, and graduate students as other sources of growth. Fortunately, UWM has an excellent portfolio of offerings for these populations and is very well positioned to serve these segments as part of UWM's and the system's growth agenda. Now I'd like to turn it back over to Tom Lujack.
Thanks, Tom and Donna. Finally, I'd like to share with you our next steps. What are we going to do with the information that we gained both 4 years ago and more recently this spring? Well, with the continued financial support of the UWM Foundation, we will move the UWM brand forward. We will do so by evolving the Something Great in Mind marketing campaign to a new message point. We're not quite sure what it is. We're developing that program, and we'll bring it back and share it with you later this fall. Our focus will continue to be on showing the results of the academic research by our faculty, staff, and students. We will engage our alumni in helping to share the UWM story with others while highlighting UWM's involvement with the community. And finally, throughout the process, our goal is to strive to build the UWM brand both here in Wisconsin and beyond. Thank you very much, and I'm going to now ask the Chancellor to come back up.
Thank you. Thank you, Tom. I would like to introduce two supporters of our institution, two former presidents of the Board of Regents. First, I'll ask Michael W. Grebe to come up, and then Sheldon B. Lubar. Michael Grebe is the current president of the Bradley Foundation, and he served as the president of the Board of Regents from 1994 to 1996. The Bradley Foundation has been very supportive of our faculty, our scholars. In particular, I need to acknowledge the support they provided to distinguished Professor Leonard Parker, a physicist, a renowned physicist, and the support for his research was very, very important. They've also supported the Catalyst Grant Program. Catalyst Grant Program is run through the UWM Research Foundation and provides seed funding to our faculty on a competitive basis. Mike will talk a bit about his experiences with higher education in the state of Wisconsin, and then I'd like to invite Sheldon B. Lubar to follow him. Shell is a good friend of the institution, a longtime supporter. He's the founder and chairman of Lubar and Company. He was president of the Board of Regents from 1996 and 1998. As you know, our School of Business is named after Shell. One of the real nice things about the gift that Shell provided to UWM in support of the school is that the building was built. We did not have to use his gift for bricks and mortar. We used it for people. And Shell and Mary Ann have been very supportive of our students and faculty. And as we had discussed the initial agreement for the gift, it had been laid out over time. And he's the one major donor that would come to me after every year, and he'd say, "Carlos, we need to put this money faster. This timeline is too long." And he would do that. And he would front-load the money to support more students, more scholarships, more faculty, more endowed professorships. These are very two good university citizens. They are also exceptional community citizens. Please welcome Mike Grebe and then Shel Lubar.
Thank you, Carlos. It's a privilege to be back with the Board of Regents, although given the tough issues this board deals with, I must confess some degree of withdrawal symptoms just being here. But I can't tell you how much I valued the time that I spent on the Board of Regents. I am not an alum of any part of the UW system, so it was a tremendous learning experience for me. I didn't have the value of an alumni association with the university. I developed a keen appreciation for the vitally important role that this institution plays in our state, and it's nice to be back. In issuing a gracious invitation to me to be here today and commenting on my remarks, the Chancellor managed to use the word brief 3 times in the same sentence. So I'm going to be brief, and I'm going to comment briefly about this university from the perspective of the donor community here in the metropolitan Milwaukee area. And I'm sure I'm going to be telling you things that you already heard from Joe Zilber and that you hear from your colleagues on the board and others who have a close-up perspective on Milwaukee and this university. As Carlos indicated, I, in a second career, am the president and CEO of the Bradley Foundation, which is the largest private foundation in our state, located here in Milwaukee. We're celebrating our 25th birthday this year. We were founded following the sale in 1985 of the old Allen Bradley Company to Rockwell. And much of the wealth that came out of that transaction to the good of this community stayed in this community. A significant portion of it went into our foundation. Allen Bradley was founded by 2 brothers who grew up just a few blocks from here. And in honoring their legacy and their donor intent, we support institutions which comprise strong civil society here in Milwaukee and elsewhere. And because institutions of higher education are very important institutions in civil society, we have, throughout our 25-year history, devoted a significant portion of our philanthropy to colleges and universities and programs within those organizations. As Carlos indicated, for years we've supported programs here in fine arts, the business school, the work of individual members of the faculty. But it's fair to say that for much of our history, we focused most of our support for colleges and universities on private institutions, believing, as our board did, that the support for the public institutions ought to come from public resources. And in a time of dwindling public resources, and you live with this a lot more than I do, we have changed our focus, and we now devote significantly more resources to support of public universities and colleges and programs within them. And that is, I'm sure, part of the reason why in recent years we have significantly stepped up our support for this university. But it's really only a small part of the reason why we have increased our support for programs like the Catalyst Grants through the UW Research Foundation. We believe that this university has become a truly integral part of this community, an increasingly important part of the community, and is deserving of our support. And more important than what we at the Bradley Foundation think, I can tell you emphatically that that opinion and that impression is shared broadly in the donor community here in the greater Milwaukee area, among both foundations and individual donors. I guess what I'm saying is that in an anecdotal way, I'm reaffirming some of the research that you saw out of the survey. UW-Milwaukee is increasingly seen as a leader in our community and as a catalyst for economic development. On the subject of leadership, I'll just share an anecdote, which is one of the things that's dangerous when the Chancellor limits you to time but not to subject matter. 16 years ago, when Shel Lubar and I were serving on this board, in the context of a biennial budget submission, we had to make a choice. And the choice had to do with faculty compensation. Some of the chancellors who've been around for a while may remember this, but the president and her administration had recommended, times were different, 6% increases, annual increases in the context of the forthcoming biennial budget. And the Regents had a slightly different proposal, which was to support 4% increases. Again, 2 annual increases in that amount. And we decided to go for our number rather than hers because we felt we could really get that, and we were prepared to a person to lobby hard with the legislature and the governor to get it. As you might imagine, that didn't go down all that well with some people on the faculty. So some of us suddenly found ourselves being invited to attend meetings of faculty senate around the system. We hadn't suddenly become more popular, but we had become very interesting. One of the faculty senate meetings I attended was here on this campus. Chancellor John Schroeder invited me to attend. And after we had what diplomats would refer to as a full and frank exchange of views, Tom, we then went into a number of other subjects. And I remember the very last question I was asked by a member of the faculty. It was an interesting question. What did I think they thought of themselves and this institution? And I said, well, I think this is a fine institution, but I think you have an inferiority complex. And unless and until we do away with that, we won't become an outstanding institution. Again, how times have changed as a result of strong leadership. Because of strong leadership through a succession of good chancellors, engaged faculty and students, this university has moved forward rapidly And that's seen here in this community. But not only do we see strong leadership within the university, UW-Milwaukee is increasingly a leader in the community. It's a leader as an institution, and it's a leader through the efforts of individual members of its administration and faculty. Picking on Carlos for just a minute, one of my civic responsibilities these days is to chair the Greater Milwaukee Committee, an organization of 100-plus business and community leaders here in Milwaukee. Carlos serves not just as a member of the GMC, he's a member of our board and our executive committee, and he would be the first to tell you that he's just an example of the kind of individual involvement that comes from this campus in our community. So, we're happy to have you here in Milwaukee. We think great things about this university, and it's a pleasure for me to be with you today. Thank you.
Good morning, and welcome all of you to Milwaukee, those of you that don't live here. It's a great place. I was born here and have lived here. And it is almost to the day that Mike and I retired from the Board of Regents 12 years ago. So I'm not here to lecture you, but I do have a message about Milwaukee and some of the issues that we're being faced with. So let me outline a few things that I think are already well known to you, but I will put some definition on them. The Milwaukee metropolitan area is the largest in the state of Wisconsin, and it is still the state's manufacturing and commercial center. The Milwaukee public school system spends annually about $15,000 per student, which is it's almost 40% more than almost any other school system does. And yet it is competing with Detroit for the lowest graduation rate in the country. Less than 50% of the MPS students graduate from high school. We also have the highest percentage of special education students in the United States. I've been advised that that number is nationally 11%. We're more like 23%, which is one of the reasons that the per capita cost of students is higher. By almost any measure, the Milwaukee public school system is a failed system. It needs help. I should also add that most of the teachers in the UW system are graduates of one of the 13 universities in your University of Wisconsin system. And I told this to Nancy Zinfer. That was the last thing I did was to chair the search committee that selected Nancy, that one of your major charge is to do something by collaborating with the Milwaukee public school system to improve this terrible situation. Too many of our problems in Milwaukee relate to a central city community where about 80% of the children are born to single-parent homes, where the unemployment rate for males in the central city is over 40%, closer to 50%. Clearly, we have serious problems here, and that means the entire state has problems. For the state to succeed, its largest metropolitan area must succeed. If you don't believe that, look across the lake at Michigan, where the demise of Detroit is sinking what was once one of the leading industrial sectors in the world. Yet, let me tell you, all is not lost. According to a very current survey, Milwaukee business is expecting to hire at a solid pace during the rest of the year. In fact, the survey says our pace will rank among the leading cities in the country. Businesses in Milwaukee are trying to grow. But one of business's biggest problems in Milwaukee is finding qualified employees. I am not a sociologist, so I won't try and tell you how to solve these social problems that I've just described. But I have been a banker and a businessman for over 50 years here in Milwaukee, and I can tell you that the path to success and a good middle-class life starts with education. It starts with high school, college, vocational training, whatever it is, but it is education. And we're not delivering here. So where does the Board of Regents come in? The University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee is the largest institution in this part of the state. As a public university, it is a force that can make the largest impact on the future of this area. Through its educational programs, its people, its staff, its faculty, through their development efforts, it is the logical venue for the citizens in the Milwaukee area to acquire advanced education. In reality, it is the largest factor that can, on a credible basis, impact the Milwaukee public school system. I mean, many of us have tried to tell them what our opinions are and what to do with no result. This institution, I believe, could and should have a result. We must recognize that a high percentage of our Central City people are poor and come from distressed backgrounds. This is a fact. I know UW-Milwaukee is working hard to carry out its educational mandate of these citizens. What it needs is more of the resources from the UW system. With that, UW-Milwaukee can be a real engine for bringing the economy of the city and in turn the state back. Without these resources, the future here is very gray. In my most simplest terms, what I'm saying is more money, more faculty, more programs, all of which will lead to more engineers, more teachers, more business school graduates, and more productive and creative citizens, which is what is required. The system, through its judicious allocation of funding, can be the difference. As I said, Milwaukee's problems are also the state of Wisconsin's problems. And Milwaukee's success will be the state's success. I don't mean to get personal here, but as regents, you were appointed by a Democratic governor, who I consider a very close friend, Jim Doyle. He, in turn, is working with a Democratic legislature. You all have that in common. I'm asking you to take ownership in this situation and carry this message to those people and to your president, also my friend, Kevin Riley. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike and Michelle. Should we entertain a few questions from the board before closing? Questions from the board? Hi, Mike. Yes.
Well, Chancellor Santiago, very, very impressive, and just a wonderful story about UWM in recent years, and certainly since my time in the legislature, this is night and into day. This is great progress at this university, and no small part because of your leadership. Could you just expand a little bit more on your policy or philosophy of concentrating on the freshman class and getting it to succeed rather than...
Sure. Yeah. Our freshman class had been growing quite dramatically over time, reaching over 4,600 at one point. From my perspective, if you looked at the retention and graduation rates of the institution, which were low even by urban institution standards, part of it was that the freshman class had extremely low retention rates, particularly for students of color. In some cases, the retention rates from one year to the next were 25%, which I've always found to be unacceptable. We took the position that if we're going to admit you to this institution, we're going to give you the tools. You're admitted because we believe you can succeed here. We're going to give you the tools to succeed. So what we basically have done is try to have a freshman class that we can provide the tools for success. And we have found, we've tried to stabilize it around 4,100. By this fall, we will have 3,900 beds to support 4,100 students and give those students the attention they need. And we acknowledge that some of the students that come to our campus need remediation. We don't reject that. We don't say we won't admit you if you need remediation. We basically say we think you can succeed, and we will help you overcome some of the academic deficiencies. We're the largest campus in terms of transfer students. We think our relationships with the two-year colleges are also very, very important. For us, the freshman class is that group that in many respects, as it was mentioned, that the selectivity has gone up, but not because we've increased the standards. We have not increased the ACT score, but the quality of the student body has gone up. And one of the things that we have done is we've begun putting financial resources into the hands of high-achieving students as part of that freshman class. And what we found is that the quality of everyone goes up as you do that. The competition within the classroom goes up and the quality has gone up. So for us, the freshman class is a very important gauge of where the university is headed, and we have to ensure that the retention rates continue to rise, and at the end of the day, graduation rates. Because that's the key. I think we need to focus on graduation rates because that's what we're all about. Yes.
Carlos, can you speak to a little bit Mr. Lubar's challenge with regard to Milwaukee public school system and what role UWM has played, and more importantly, what advanced role UWM can play in the future?
This is an area that is crucially important for the city, for the state. Improvements in public K-12 education is hugely important. UWM's role, I think, has always been strong. We provide teachers. We provide the bulk of the teachers. We provide good qualified teachers. We provide administrators, school administrators as well. We have our own charter schools that we monitor very, very carefully. So we see ourselves as part of the solution to the issues of K-12 education. Clearly, from my perspective, it's one thing, one institution cannot alone resolve that issue. The problems are complicated, the issues are complex, and we can help, we can be at the forefront. Our school, we've received grants to revamp the mathematics curriculum in MPS. We've worked with Letters and Science in the School of Education and the Peck School of the Arts to look at the curriculum in MPS, and we think we've been playing an important role. But I worry, quite frankly, that if this institution were to be the sole charge of fixing, if you want to use that term, fixing the K-12 public education system in Milwaukee, I think that puts a burden on this institution, which I'm not sure we could handle. We're not big enough. We don't have the resources to do that, but we are more than happy to partner with any other institution, public or private, to ensure that that happens. Yes?
Well, I have a follow-up on that one. Because I do agree with you. I don't think that UWM solely is, but I think it's going to need to be a much bigger player in terms of the results that we seek to achieve as a city, as a state, on this issue. So 2 examples that I would like to put on the record. One is the Milwaukee Partnership Academy, or whatever it's called. In my opinion, it's just my opinion, has waned in its effectiveness over the years, and I don't know if it means that there's some thoughtful look that needs to happen with that organization as a way or vehicle of continued partnership and collaboration or not. But I do think that UWM played a major role in MPA, and I think that might be a vehicle to look at. Secondly, I do think in terms of how we prepare our teachers, UWM obviously is not the only provider of teachers to MPS or any of the schools in Milwaukee that educate our children. However, I do think there's a big opportunity there with leadership, that choices that you'll hopefully be making soon with respect to the College of Ed, because I do think that we need to look at how we're preparing teachers to teach in NPS and other schools within the city. So I think both of those are opportunities for stepping up. Again, not in the sole role, but in a more value-add role to the crisis that we are experiencing as discussed by Mr. Lubar. The other question I have, so that's my point, but my question is, I'm really curious about the enrollment growth comparisons that some of the speakers mentioned, 27% at UWM versus 19% in the nation, and so on and so forth. And I guess the question I have is how do you feel about that being sustained? It's an awful high growth, or do you see that something's going to have to change in terms of the extreme, if you will, nature of the enrollment growth? And then second question, just because I got the floor, is with respect to third-year retention and your thoughts about third-year retention issues at UWM.
Okay. Let me address one of your comments on the Milwaukee Partnership Academy, because I have and I'll give you my candid perspective on it. The Milwaukee Partnership Academy really has 2 layers. There is what I call the superstructure, where the chancellor, the school superintendent, the mayor, the head of the business community, the head of the teachers union, all sit around, and others sit around a table. Then there is a secondary level, which is where the faculty of the university are interacting with staff and teachers in MPS in grants programs. And that second level has really worked very, very well. I think they've continued to stimulate grants in the education area for the benefit of MPS. I have my opinion on the superstructure, however, and I came into it, was that it was a time for a lot of polite discussion. And the tough issues at MPS were always skirted around the edges. No one was driving at them. They were great breakfasts, and we shared notes, and we signed grant forms, and we went on our merry way. And that group did not, for whatever reason, did not tackle the issues. And it wasn't because we didn't want to. I think it was because we were, in some respects, our institutions were not developed to really tackle some of those issues. And I felt at the end of the day, and I became the chair of it, and the first thing I said a few years ago, I chaired it with Tim Sheehy, I said, let's meet only when we have business to conduct. 2 years ago, we have never met. So, I think that's an answer to your question. On the issue of enrollment, that is a huge question for this campus. Can we continue to grow at the levels that we have? I don't believe we can. We've looked at the freshman class. We've tried to stabilize the freshman class. You know, one of the things that I've been very proud of this institution is while the freshman class was being sort of downsized a bit, we increased diversity. That was very important to the mission of the campus. But we are increasingly at the transfer campus, that we receive transfers from all over the system. Our graduate student enrollment has been rising dramatically, and we think this is good for this community as well. I'm always torn by the needs of this community that has a relatively low baccalaureate graduation rate, the relatively few baccalaureate degree holders in the area, and knowing that, you know, we are now graduating 5,000 students. We've crossed the 5,000 student level last year, and we surpassed it this year. Can we slow that down? And the big factor is going to be quality. If we continue to grow and cannot sustain that growth with quality, then we shouldn't do it. I am satisfied that the faculty and staff of this campus have really stepped up. Without huge numbers of additional bodies, you see the results. One of the most telling results from the Littman-Hearn study was that the students increasingly perceive our faculty as caring about them. That's a huge indicator for us. If we saw the results moving in an opposite direction, I would be extremely concerned. And if it impacted on the quality of the education students get, I'd be concerned. Thank you. Any other? Yes.
I think it was great that Mr. Lubar was here, and I thought his comments about the state of the city and the state of MPS were something that we all need to hear and continue to need to hear. I just have a suggestion for next year when we're here. Perhaps you and Dr. Thornton could give us a report on the collaboration between UWM and MPS that's taken place in the 12 months.
Absolutely. We'd be happy to do that. I met Dr. Thornton for the first time this week, actually for an interesting collaboration. We had a donor that was willing to provide resources to MPS so that students up to the 8th grade could take our summer basketball, men's and women's basketball camps. And we thought that was a very good idea, so that's just this week. There are a lot of initiatives that we would love to be able to talk to you about as well. We'll be happy to do that. Okay? Let me, housekeeping items. 2 housekeeping items. I've been told, although I don't see a lot of the blue bottles, that our green theme for this meeting includes those blue water bottles that you've received. And I've been told that they have been washed and are ready for your use over the day and a half here at UWM. So I can assure you they've been washed. Also for lunch, there will be individuals that will be guiding you to the Soref Commons in the library where we'll have the lunch this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Chancellor Santiago, and thank you to your colleagues. I noticed those 2 former Regent presidents slipped out of here pretty quickly and effectively. That's it. I just wanted to say before we proceed with our next agenda items, let me note that we do have a pretty full agenda both today and tomorrow, as it has been alluded to, and we're going to be working through some rather complicated and substantive issues. I want to just, on that front, make a quick observation. I like to tell people I talk to both in the state and from time to time elsewhere that the University of Wisconsin is the finest university system in the country. And I also like to claim that this Board of Regents is one of the best governing boards in the country. I have a lot of evidence to support the first assertion, the accountability reports and other things. Truth be told, I don't have a lot to back the latter claim. But I do from time to time have some anecdotal evidence from reading articles in Trusteeship magazine, or I'll ask the chancellors or other campus leadership who occasionally tell me the truth about how they feel we are doing compared to other governing boards around the country. But there was another bit of evidence that came to me on Tuesday night. I happened to be watching ESPN Sports Center, and they were talking and covering the sort of the current kerfuffle over conference realignment as it relates to the Big 12 conference. And they breathlessly reported action on 2 fronts. First, the Colorado Board of Regents had scheduled an emergency executive committee meeting that evening to discuss and weigh in on the wisdom of Colorado being included or not included in the Big 12, Pac-10, Pac-12, Pac-16, whatever they're creating out there. And at the same time, a Baylor University regent named Buddy Jones. I spent 10 years in Texas, and Rick Wells can confirm this. I am absolutely convinced that every 3rd male in Texas is named Buddy. But anyway, Buddy Jones had sent a scathing and rather colorful email to the
On the left side, $125 million from GPRN cuts, $17.6 million from other non-federal, non-gift program revenues, plus another $23.2 million from auxiliary reserves. In addition, the state budget required all UW system faculty and academic staff members to take 16 days of unpaid furlough over 2 years, equal to more than a 3% pay loss for all our faculty and staff. This added $40 million in GPR cuts and $16 million in program revenue cuts to the university. You've got a little more information beyond the slide on this in your red files this morning, your red folders. So when you total this all up, totaling more than $255 million in cuts over 2 years, these reductions and reallocations mean that our chancellors and deans and department chairs and other UW leaders must once again find new ways to cut costs and boost efficiency, all the while preserving quality and protecting the core of our educational enterprise. The budget that we present today reflects those tough choices, as well as our commitment to offer a high-quality UW education at a reasonable, affordable price. Setting that price is not an easy action to take, especially when so many families continue to feel the financial squeeze. We must balance our concerns about affordability with our obligation to uphold student access, the quality of UW academic programs, and the overall value of our students' educational experience. In recent years, we've been largely successful in keeping tuition increases relatively modest and very predictable. For the last 3 years, we've held annual increases at our 4-year campuses to 5.5%, a smaller rate of growth than most of our peer colleges and universities. With an emphasis on predictability, I am recommending that this board approve another 5.5% increase for resident undergraduate students. I am also recommending that we freeze tuition at the UW colleges for the 4th consecutive year, leaving tuition at 2006-07 levels for the 13,000 students enrolled at those campuses. If you approve this budget, I can assure you that the UW campuses will continue to offer very competitive prices. UW-Madison tuition would remain the second lowest in the Big Ten. UW-Milwaukee tuition, the tuition on this campus, would rank 12th out of 15 peer universities. Average tuition at the UW system's 11 comprehensive universities would rank 30th among tuition at 35 comparable regional universities. Tuition at the UW colleges would be nearly identical with this freeze to tuition at the Wisconsin technical colleges that offer comparable liberal arts transfer programs. Tuition for non-resident undergraduate students and for resident graduate students would increase by the same dollar amount as resident undergraduate students, which is consistent with previous actions of this board. I should also mention that we've worked hard with the campuses to hold down other costs for students, including segregated fees and meal plans and room rates. In a few instances, the numbers presented to you today have been reduced from their original proposed amounts, thanks to the good work of our campus business officers and our UW system budget staff. Going forward, we'll ask those chief business officers and their student affairs counterparts to work with system staff on a strategic approach to these fee increases, with a goal of producing reasonable, predictable increases that mirror our approach to tuition. For the time being, it's important to remember the context for today's recommended tuition and fee rates. By sharpening our pencils, we've avoided double-digit tuition increases or massive reductions in enrollments that have occurred at other universities around the country. We've also found some new ways to provide a safety net for students who don't have the financial resources to absorb any kind of tuition increase, no matter how modest. For the second year in a row, students whose family income is at or below the state median income of $60,000 will be held harmless from tuition increases if they have documented need. Similarly, UW-Madison students from families with a household income of $80,000 or less will be held harmless from tuition increases resulting from the Madison Initiative for Undergraduates. And you'll recall the UW Eau Claire's Blue Gold commitment, which you recently approved, contains its own hold harmless provision based on students' expected family contribution. While the state's biennial budget provided no shortage of challenging cuts, it did preserve funding for the Wisconsin Higher Education Grant, or WEG-UW program that Chuck alluded to a few minutes ago, and state funding for WEG will increase by $3.3 million next year. We hope that the federal government will also provide some additional aid. The maximum award for Pell Grant recipients is scheduled to increase by $200, up to $5,500, and new eligibility rules for Pell mean more UW students will qualify for those federal grants next year. First, however, Congress must act to address a significant shortfall in that program, and we are on record urging the Congress to do just that. Closer to home, new private investments are offering additional aid. Nearly 2,000 UW students received $3.4 million in new need-based assistance from the Fund for Wisconsin Scholars, the fund created by John and Tasha Morgridge during the 2008-9 academic year. A second cohort of students in the 9-10 academic year received $4.27 million from the Fund for Wisconsin Scholars, and a third cohort of students will enroll at UW schools this fall with aid from the Fund for Wisconsin Scholars as well. So that very generous gift by the Morgridges has started to actually deliver on the ground for our students, I'm happy to say. All in all, these are very important real steps to ensure that we back up our commitments to provide a high-quality UW education that remains accessible and affordable. More than ever, we must work to help people understand that the real bottom line impact of this need-based aid. A recent poll by the College Board shows that students and parents often rule out colleges based solely on the published sticker price, so-called, of tuition, without considering available aid. Even more troubling is the finding that lower-income families, those with the greatest need, were least likely to aggressively pursue financial aid or consider it in their college-going decisions. Everyone who's seen a TV commercial for new automobiles knows about rebates and incentives, and almost nobody walks into a car dealership these days expecting to pay the sticker price. We need to take a page from their marketing campaigns and do a better job of explaining the net price of a college education. According to a report last year by the College Board, full-time dependent students at public four-year colleges and universities receive an average of $5,400 in grants, scholarships, and federal tax benefits. That's exclusive of loans. This significantly reduced the net cost of college for most students. According to that same report, these net costs have actually declined in recent years for families earning less than $60,000. Beyond the price of tuition, there are many other components to this annual budget that is before you in that thick stack of paper that you all received in the mail. So I want now to turn the floor over to Associate Vice President Frida Harris for a brief overview of our proposed 2010 annual budget. And when Frida is done, we'll open the floor for questions and reactions from the board. Frida.
Good morning. Want to briefly run through some of the increases and changes in our annual budget and provide you just an overview of what is happening with the budget. In looking at the 2010-11 annual budget, we'll be talking about, again, changes in the annual budget, the dollar amounts that we have from one year to the next, what our tuition policies and practices are, what changes we'll see on the auxiliary services side, and a look at overall tuition and fees that students will be paying. As far as overall budget changes goes, the university's budget will increase by $839 million from 2009-10 to 2010-11. Now, that's a very, very large increase. It is more than you would typically see. The primary reason for the increase in the budget of that size is that we are participating now, all of our campuses are required to participate with federal direct student loans, and that adds about $680 million to the budget for this year. So it's not typical what you're seeing here. The funding is not money that is being assessed to students or funds that can be used for educating additional students. It's money that students otherwise would have probably gone to a bank for and taken out a loan, and those funds help pay for their tuition. So it's basically dollars that we would typically have seen coming in as tuition dollars. Oh, sorry. With the budget, GPR funds are going up $39.5 million, and that's a 3.5% increase, and will represent 21% of the total system budget. Tuition and fee amounts are increasing by $60 million. That's a 5.7% increase and will represent about 20% of the total budget. The other funds, as I mentioned, is going up quite significantly. That's 28.8% of the total increase, and we will have 59% of the total budget would be covered by other funds. As we're looking at some of the key changes in the budget from 2009-10 to 2010-11, we are starting off with a $2.2 billion budget. We've got funding that is being added for the Wisconsin Institutes for Discovery, which is research funding. We have funding for the tuition increase grant, which President Riley just mentioned to you. That provides funding for families, students from families with income of $60,000 or less than $60,000 to cover the increase in tuition so that they will not feel the impact of any tuition increases. We have $5 million for the recruitment and retention fund that helps us to recruit and retain faculty and certain academic staff within the university system. And there's about $9 million of additional resources related to utilities and debt service. There's some one-time money that we had in the budget last year that is coming out. That's for genomics at the UW-Madison campus. We've got $32 million for pay plan and fringe changes. Now, that is an odd thing to see at a time when pay plan increases are actually 0%, when we don't have any pay plan increases and staff will have to take furloughs during this period of time. However, we have seen a huge increase in our health insurance and retirement costs, and that is reflected in that number. Last year, we used $17 million of one-time funding for furloughs to help with budget reduction. This year, we're asking you to use $15.5 million, so there's a decrease in that furlough savings. And we are asking you to offset part of the general reduction through tuition by $17 million. In addition to that, we have some self-supporting activities, increases of $24 million. That gets us to a total of $2.3 actual billion in the budget. So the self-supporting activities includes differential tuition funding. It includes funding for continuing education where students pay for the cost of the programs that they have, and also for some enrollment growth. So that makes up that particular number. In our annual budget, we also need to recognize that all potential costs are not included in there. We have some things that we have to be concerned about that might happen during this next annual period. One of which is that there is in the biennial budget a $200 million required state lapse that has to be assigned by the Department of Administration. They have not decided how that will be apportioned, but that is something that could impact the university's budget. We also have a potential fringe benefit shortfall. As I mentioned, we had significant increases in health insurance and retirement costs, and we tried to include the amounts that we are expecting to have, but if they go up more than that, it could result in a shortfall for us. And another thing is that depending upon the state's finances, we might have a potential mid-year lapse. But those are things we can't predict at this particular moment in time, but they're, again, something we may have to deal with as the year goes on. Tuition policy and practice. The board has established policies for tuition, and some of those policy principles are that we need to balance quality, ability to pay, and access through tuition and financial aid. We need to have increases that are moderate and predictable and subject to the need to maintain quality. And we want to seek to maximize financial aid support to the extent possible. And we would like to assume, as we are looking at general tuition revenues, that they would be funded through a 65% state funding and 35% through tuition. A question that people ask is, why are tuition increases needed in 2010-11? Some of the reasons are to offset the $35 million ongoing general reduction that was added to the university's budget in the 2009-11 biennial budget. We want to try to offset that so that we can maintain the capacity to do the growth agenda and provide high-quality instruction to the students that we have. We also want to try to continue the key instructional and support services that will provide that quality education, and again, limit impacts on access and quality by maintaining class sizes and not having large increases, maintaining the number of faculty that we have to provide that instruction, and making sure that we have the number of class offerings that are needed to help students move through the system at a very steady pace. The specific pieces that make up the 5.5% tuition increase that we're recommending for this year are $16 million on the tuition side of that $32 million that we talked about previously for fringe benefits and pay increases. $17 million to offset the general reduction that was in the budget. Last year, when you were looking at the general reduction in tuition setting, you provided $18 million to offset the $35 million of ongoing. This year, we're asking you to offset the other 17 to totally take care of that. Again, to maintain the capacity for the growth agenda and to provide quality instruction. Even with those reductions, though, taking care of the general reduction, campuses will still have to manage $10 million of across-the-board GPR reductions, another $8.8 million of program revenue reductions, and they will also have to take furloughs and manage the auxiliary reductions as well. So there are a number of things that will still have to be taken care of on the campuses. In addition, some funding is required to take care of the tuition share of utilities, the student technology fee, and the recruitment and retention funds. For the increases in tuition, when you look historically, in 2007-08, we had increases of 6.8% at most of our institutions and 7.3% at the colleges. Since that time, we have tried to be very predictable and maintain affordability. We've had 5.5% increases for our resident undergraduate students for the last 4 years, and the colleges have had a freeze in tuition, again providing an affordable entry point into the University of Wisconsin system for more than 13,000 resident students. When we look at comparisons to peers, UW-Madison is the second lowest in tuition to the peers, and we expect that to remain the same. Madison, Milwaukee, and the comprehensives all are below their peer averages, even with the increases, and they are significantly below. So we will not expect to see increases in the position of our campuses as compared to the peers. The colleges, again, will have a freeze for the fourth consecutive year if you pass the budget that we are presenting to you today. We've also thought of different ways that we can improve affordability, and President Riley's gone through most of these, so I'll be very brief about it. There is a $3.3 million increase in WEG funding this year, and that will help us to increase the number of awards that are given out. There was a large number of students last year who were placed on a wait list. The changes in the funding and the method that is being used will help us to add awards to about 1,800 students. We are providing the tuition increase grant for middle-income families. If they come from families with $60,000 or less income and don't receive a WEG, their tuition increase would be covered, so they would not pay the tuition increase. The Pell Grant maximum is expected to increase by $200 this year. That is assuming that they take care of the funding gap that exists right now, but again, the expectation is it would be $200. We have the freeze in tuition for the colleges. Madison and Eau Claire differentials both include financial aid to assure affordability, and we have had increases in private institutional aid in the system, so there's more money there to address need. And we are working on initiatives to reduce the time to degree. On the auxiliary services, we have increases in our fees that average 5.7%, and some of the fee increases are used for student initiatives, for contracts with new vendors, for adding services for students, and for new buildings. Facility maintenance is another area. With segregated fees, we have, what are segregated fees? These are fees for programs and services such as health services, recreational sports, athletics, parking. They are necessary to fund programs and services that support the students on campus. Segregated fees, as you can see, range quite a bit at our campuses. The lowest segregated fee amount is paid at UW-Scout. Our largest amount is paid at UW-Green Bay. The segregated fees are also, we have increases from $14 at UW-La Crosse to $134 at UW-Superior. And again, some of the major reasons for these increases are funding for major projects, student-approved facilities enhancements, student-initiated program, and compensation and supplies. With room and board, again, there is a fairly wide range of increases and amounts paid by campus, and that depends upon what happens in discussions with students and with the campuses about what those new initiatives and programs will be. Room and board ranges from $5,208 at Platteville to $7,435 at UW-Madison and averages $5,849. Increases are actually zero at UW-La Crosse, so they are freezing their room and board rates and go up to $450 at Green Bay. Major reasons are new and remodeled res halls, facility maintenance projects, and new meal plans and extended service hours. When we look at combined tuition and fees, the average cost increases are $631 for a resident student who is living on campus and taking a meal plan. Less than 25% of our students actually live on campus and take the meal plan. So when you're looking at this, it's a relatively small proportion of the students. And that is also if they are not eligible for hold harmless, because if they're eligible for the hold harmless, they would not pay the tuition increase. It's $417 for students who are paying tuition and fees and not eligible for the hold harmless, and and $57 for students who are paying only SEG fees and eligible for the hold harmless. So that pretty much covers changes in the annual budget. And what we are asking you to do is to approve the tuition and fees that are included in the budget that we have provided to you. At this point, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those. Yes.
Frida, maybe you mentioned it and I missed it, but can you give us a rough idea of how many students fall into that last of your three categories? And how many fall into the middle category?
Okay. There is a table that's included in your document, and it's called the Consolidated Tuition and Fees Table. It is Table A2. That provides you with information on the number of students who live on campus and participate in meal programs and, yes, pay tuition, live on campus, and pay meals. As far as how many students, then I think your question is how many students fall into the second category, which is students who pay tuition and are not eligible for a hold harmless award. I'm sorry I didn't bring that information with me, but Chris, how many students did we have who received the hold harmless award? We had about 13,000 students then who received a hold harmless award last year. So out of our total, 170,000 plus students. Then we have 13,000 who are getting the hold harmless, so you'd be at about 160,000 students then who would not be receiving that award. But then they would also be eligible for the WEG and other programs. So does that help?
Frida, it's important for Regents to understand, correct me if I'm wrong, but that the hold harmless at 60,000 and under applies to people who are not getting the WEG award.
Correct. That is correct. It applies to people who are not getting the WEG award. We had about 32,000, Chris again, yes. So if you add those together, the 25,000 who received the WEG, plus the 13,000 who got the hold harmless, you're looking at about 38,000 of the students who would have had some funding to help with the tuition increase under those. And that excludes the Pell, which also is available to a large number of students.
Well, let me ask it another way. Of the tuition increase that's being proposed, we have 2/3 of our students who will be affected by that?
Yes. That's about right, yes.
Okay, thanks.
Again, 2/3 of the students would be affected, but if they come from families with incomes of $60,000 or less, they would not be affected at all, because either they would get the WEG or they would get the tuition increase grant. So our lower to middle income students are not impacted by this.
Is it closer to say if the Board of Regents approve a 5.5% tuition increase, approximately half of the students would be fully affected by that?
I don't have a number. I can certainly work to get that number to you. Again, I say that there's 40,000 students that probably are not going to be impacted at all, but I don't have the statistics on Pell. So I can't tell you what that would mean as far as the Pell increase is concerned, whether that would be half the students or not.
Part of the message there is that some of the students then who would get Pell wouldn't be entirely held harmless from the entire increase, but might not have to pay all of it.
Right. But we know for the lowest income group that we are covering the increase. So.
Regents.
Dr. Harris, the portion of the budget that's other, there's about 60% that's other. There was a pretty significant increase in that, 28%. What do you attribute that increase to? I mean, is that because of increased federal assistance?
It's not increased federal assistance. It is a requirement that the campuses provide federal direct student loans. Those loans previously would have been handled probably through a bank. So it's not that the students wouldn't have had access to those funds previously. It's just that now they're being handled at our campuses. So it's not necessarily providing any additional assistance to students, but it is changing where the money resides. The money resides in the university's budget, doesn't add any additional capacity for students to get financial aid. It doesn't provide any additional resources for us to provide education. And that's $680 million of change for this year.
So are we just a conduit?
We are indeed.
Do we get any administrative overhead? There's some amount of work that we have to do in processing that. It's not something that just magically flows from the federal to the student. Do we get any assistance or anything to cover our costs for processing all of that?
Actually, I will refer back to Chris again. And he's shaking his head, no, we don't get anything for that. So it's something they're going to have to manage within the campuses. Yes.
Regent Falcon and Regent Lott.
We talk about non-resident tuition is not going up 5.5%. It's going up the same dollar amount as the 5.5% represents of resident tuition. We also make the statement that non-resident tuition covers their full cost plus the deficit cost of one resident student.
What we actually say there is that the funding will cover two.
Okay.
The state share of.
My point on it, and I get concerned about that maybe over time things change and we may be saying something that's not actually, that may not be totally accurate. You made the comment that the average cost increase is $631.
That is tuition, seg fees, room and board, not just tuition.
Okay, so you still would make the statement that the difference in non-resident from their cost, the excess, still covers two students?
We would.
Okay.
It is on average, yes. UW-Madison was not part of that particular decision because when we decided to roll back non-resident tuition, we did it at Milwaukee and the comprehensive institutions, not at UW-Madison.
So is there, just for clarity, is there an equivalent number at UW-Madison that you would represent?
It is still a significant amount that is contributed by non-resident students, but we just don't use the same 2 times formula in looking at UW-Madison.
Thanks. President Pruitt, would it be okay if I had something distributed for a question on freeze for the colleges?
Sir.
Okay. Frida, just to clarify, differential tuition is added after the general tuition increase, as a dollar amount?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so tuition goes up 5.5%, then the differential tuitions at each campus, whatever they are added as a dollar amount.
Any change in the differentials, yes.
Okay. Then on the colleges, obviously when tuition is frozen, there's a shift of resources in the budget. What is the shift and where does the shift come from?
The shift of resources would occur within the 5.5% tuition increase. That is the general increase for all students. The shift basically is that we have a certain amount of money that needs to be generated from any of the tuition increases. And what would happen then is that each student would pay an additional amount. And when we've looked at it, I think we were about $8 to $10, around $8 more of the tuition increase would be paid by students at other institutions. However, when we've worked with various groups to look at options for affordability, we've talked about the need to have different levels of tuition at different institutions, and that was part of what was brought forward with the Tuition and Financial Aid Working Group, was looking at stratification, so having some lower cost entry points and having tuition higher at other locations. And so this is consistent with that. And again, part of the idea is that we would maintain a location where students can live at home and have tuition increases that are relatively low, and then save funding so that they can then move on and continue their education. So it's just one of the many ways that we're trying to address affordability. Does that help?
Yeah. So of the 5.5% increase, and indeed of the 5.5% increase over the last several years, a portion of that goes to subsidize the freezing tuition policy at the colleges.
Assuming they provide the same services.
Yes, a small, I would say very small portion of it, yes.
Okay. Well, I've asked to be handed out this one sheet of paper that Sharon Wilhelm and Gail Bergman were kind enough to answer my questions. And I think my point of discussion here is on continuing the policy of freezing tuition at the colleges, and whether that is doing what we intended to do, and what is it we intended to do. You can see here the graduation rates for both baccalaureate and associate degree rates are relatively low. And my question is, not for this budget, but for the future, the question is, we seem to be directing students into the colleges because of the cost differential policy that we're putting forth. There's a relatively low likelihood of success for those students, it seems, if the measurement is degrees. So I guess I would ask in the future that we really examine our policy in this area and what the impact is. And the second part of that is, are we doing this partly to compete with the technical colleges? And if so, how's that working out?
Technical colleges aren't lacking for people these days.
So, I guess, President Pruitt, President Riley, that's my point. The success rate needs to be better here, especially if we're going to have a policy that has an incentive for students to go into this system.
Can I just point out just a couple things? And I can then just ask maybe somebody else who deals more on the academic side, but I know that for many of the students who enter the colleges, the associate's degree isn't the goal. And so it hasn't been necessarily the goal for students entering to get the associate's degree. It is part of the entry that you have into the system and going to other institutions. So not all of the students are planning to stay for the full 2 years and get the associate's degree. The other thing is we've had a number of discussions about the swirl of students, that students move from the UW system colleges to the tech colleges and then back again. So there is a certain amount of trying to find your way and knowing what you want to do with your career. So those things I think need to be taken into consideration as we look at the success rates. Certainly it has helped to increase enrollment at the colleges. We've seen that. So to a certain extent, I think we have seen success with the policy that we have here. But again, I deal mostly on the financial side, not the academic side, but those are things that I thought might be things that we should consider in the conversation.
Chancellor Wilson, would you like to make a comment? You can come up to the table if you want.
First of all, thank you very much, Regent Loftus, for raising the question and putting these numbers in front of us. I have actually 2 points to make on this. The first is I did look at the most recent accountability data, and what that particular report shows is that 6 years out, 84% of the students actually who start the UW colleges have either an associate degree, a bachelor's degree, or are still enrolled in a college or university. That's the first point. That's according to the latest UW System Accountability Report. The second is I've had our staff to take a look at the ACT composite scores around the UW system, and I just want to share a little bit of this with you because the UW colleges is an open access institution. We admit really 99% of all students who apply to us. But to put this in numerical terms, if you look at the composite ACT score between 13 and 15, only 2% of students enrolled in the UW system actually fall into that category. Within the colleges, it's 17%. If you were to go up one more interval and look at 16 to 19, across the UW system, it's about 17% of the students actually that fall into that category. Within the colleges, it's 37%. And so one takeaway from this is that we really pride ourselves in the colleges of taking students where they are, and our faculty will work with them to get them to where they need to be successful. But those students are coming to us with some deficits, and we pride ourselves on the value that we add to that undergraduate experience. And so as we look at the educational attainment goals, one of the things that we have been talking about in the colleges is that you have to look at our institution a little bit differently, because if the predicted success of a student in a certain category is X, and if we are at Y, then I think that's something that the state should applaud, that we are taking students who normally would be in a trip, who normally would perhaps be a drain on the state, and we are giving them an opportunity to become a contributing citizen by owning a baccalaureate degree.
I'd like to, I also was going to ask a question about the colleges, but maybe a slightly different direction. And I do have a concern about the 4 years of no tuition increase. And I guess this is direct maybe to the Chancellor and to Kevin. My worry is how long can you sustain doing this, of going from year to year without tuition increase? And yet, as was mentioned just on the insurance alone, there was a significant cost of increase. Well, the same thing is happening, whether it be in the utilities and classroom supplies and so on and so forth. At what point, even if they were having success meeting Regent Loftus' question and that they were being successful, at what point would we have to still come to the conclusion that you just cannot keep doing that because the cost of doing business is just not sustainable? And so the concern that I have is twofold. One is what is being sacrificed at the colleges in order to be able to sustain that no tuition increase. And the other concern that I have is if and when we do have to introduce an increase, are we going to be forced to have to do it at a significantly much higher percentage, because now we're trying to catch up for a lot of years that we were not doing it? Should we not consider the introduction of maybe a minor or a relatively minor increase on a yearly basis, maybe half of the increase that's being proposed for the rest of the system? But again, my worry is how long can you sustain this, and what is not being done or what's being sacrificed? What's the additional burden that the colleges are having to bear to do that? And are we going to have a floodgate when we do have to do it, and it may backfire by frightening students that all of a sudden we're having a rather large tuition increase?
President Brown. Well, let me say that I think Regent Loftus' and Regent Vasquez's lines of inquiry are good ones, and a couple of responses. We make this decision on a year-by-year basis, trying to look at all the factors, and we have a pretty healthy debate among ourselves about whether we ought to continue it. And I think we ought to, given the length of having done it now for 4 years, if you approve this budget, we ought to have an even more healthier debate next time around for some of the reasons that you're both raising. And let me touch on a couple of the things, specific items you raised. Jose, there's been no damage done because we subsidized that. So there's not going to be a catch-up needed in that regard for the colleges when we go back to having increases. The part of what we're trying to do here in the context of the wider system is to provide more different kinds of choices for parents and students, so that if they really are in a situation where they want to say, I can't afford to, I don't want to have my son or daughter, I don't want, if I'm a student, to have to pay room and board costs at college for the first 2 years, and I really need to keep my costs down on the tuition side, this is one of those options. So I would say doing this is in response to the very strong message we've gotten consistently from this board that you've got to find ways to keep a UW education affordable for a wide range of families. This is one element of that, along with the other things we've talked about this morning. In terms of the issue of, what's the graduation rate, how many associate degrees are earned, how many baccalaureates are earned, I think that's worth looking at. I always go back when I think about some of these debates it plays off what Chancellor Wilson just said about, was it 84%, if you add into Regent Loftus' question, how many are still enrolled after 6 years? It climbs to 84%. When I was in New York, the City University of New York had many, many part-time students, many disadvantaged students from the city, and they did a study that showed that their graduation rate for the earning of the baccalaureate actually went up after 10 years of time, because so many of their students were working so much, so many of them were dropping out for a semester and coming back. That's not desirable in many ways, we would argue, but if that's the only way you can do it, and you can do it that way, that's the way you get it done. I suspect, given the backgrounds of some of our students who start at the colleges, there's some of that. And one interesting line of inquiry could be, for the next year, as we look at this, What happens if you look at the 7-year graduation rate or the 8-year graduation rate at the colleges? But I think these are all good lines of inquiry. And any others that come up today on this, we will take them to heart and go back and take a look and factor them in to a discussion with you for how we handle this issue in future years.
Mr. Palpa.
I think part of it may be going back to why we froze the colleges, and that was to make them more competitive for a distinct group of students that they serve. And we've come full circle now to say, okay, we needed to freeze them because their tuition was going up faster the way we had tied it together. And maybe at some point in time, and maybe next time around, it's time to look at it again, but they should be unbundled from the comprehensives and the research institutions and looked at as a standalone to determine where we need to go. Everything we do when we either freeze tuition or do a differential, we're subsidizing something somewhere. Everywhere, right? If we don't raise the tuition at the UW colleges, it has to be subsidized from somewhere else. Every time we do a differential, a portion of it is for financial aid subsidy, so we're subsidizing. Every time we raise tuition, it's not equal across the board. Part of that tuition is funding unfunded mandates. So I think it's appropriate to look at all of that, but I think it's also appropriate to unbundle the colleges from tuition increase situations. Having said that, freezing for 4 years, it's probably time to look at it again next time around.
Regent Davis.
Totally different topic. Rita, I have a couple of clarifying questions for you. The pay plan and fringe benefit changes that you mentioned in that slide, the retirement costs were one of the items that you said were a chunk of the 32.5. Are those retirement costs predicted, and this is just time to pay, or is there an issue? The second question has to do with in the improving affordability, you mentioned Madison and Eau Claire's differential, including financial aid, and I'm just wondering what distinguishes La Crosse.
Okay. With the pay plan and fringe benefits question, retirement costs were not anticipated. When we were building the biennial budget, that's typically when we build in our retirement costs, and we have a percentage there that is associated with what percent of the salaries is there for retirement. That cost went up in the 2009-10 year. It was not expected. It's not usual, and so that, again, is a big part of the increase that we have here. With Eau Claire and Madison, we had the study of the tuition and financial aid working group prior to the differentials at those campuses, and one of the recommendations from the tuition and financial aid working group was that when we have differentials, that they should have a financial aid component. A distinguishing factor with La Crosse was that it was done before that work was done for the tuition and financial aid working group. Another part was that it had been originally included as part of La Crosse's proposal when we were doing it as a biennial budget initiative, and there was significant resistance by the legislature on that. And so when they brought forward a differential for that, they excluded the financial aid component. The legislature did not want to have the financial aid piece included.
So we are
I agree, if I'd like, we sought legislative approval with wanting them to receive into financial aid and couldn't get it. So that was an education in the legislative process for me, because one would think our legislators would say this would be a good thing to use money for financial aid, but that was not the case. So we were quite disappointed that we couldn't do that. What's that? No, we don't.
I still have a question about the UW colleges sheet that was passed out, and maybe this is best for the Chancellor to answer. This 10.2% achievement of an associate degree within 2 years, at least on my understanding, might belie the truth just a little bit, because as I understand it, there's many people within the colleges that successfully complete 2 years of coursework and transfer on directly to get a bachelor's degree without actually getting that associate's degree. And so it seems like there's a much higher level of success than this particular number determines. Is that true? And would you know what percentage, actually just get the associates, or what percentage move on?
Regent Wingate, you're absolutely right. Many of the students who actually come to us, because we are primarily transfer institutions, they may come for a year and do the 30 credits and then transfer to Madison or Eau Claire or one of our other campuses. And so they might not stay for the 2 years. And so in the educational attainment goals, one of our goals is that we want them to stay for 2 years, because the research shows that if they stay the 2 years and get the associate degree and then transfer, we have almost an 80% graduation rate with that cohort. Then we have the other group that will stay for 2 years, not get the associate degree, but transfer to our comprehensive campuses. And so once again, that 10.4%, you have to sort of know what you're looking at in order to, I think, reach a conclusion about how we're working with our students in the transfer mission.
Thank you very much. Frida, I was wondering about the pay plan and the fringe fringe changes or post-employment benefits. I'm assuming that that's what that is. I'm just wondering, is that something that we anticipate as we go into the biennial budget for 11 to 13? Will we be the next year out confronted with this kind of, with the $32.5 million? In other words, will we be able to anticipate this? Will we be able to do something about it? Or is this something that's going to happen every year?
This is much higher than we would typically see. What you would typically see, at least on the tuition side rather than the $16 million, is something in the range of about $6 million on the fee side for fringe benefits. For the next biennium, what will happen is, as we are looking at what we request for funding from the state and what they would provide to us, is ratcheting up to what the actual rate is. And so I wouldn't anticipate you seeing this kind of a change. It is very unusual, very atypical.
Dr. Harris, just one follow-up question on that. Do we see anything in the health care reform legislation that was passed that would help in terms of our health care costs?
No. I don't anticipate that there's anything in there that is going to help with our costs.
I was going to say to ask, we can continue to discuss this, but I was wondering if I might have a motion to approve Resolution 2 approving the 2010-11 operating budget. Second? Second. Okay. We can continue discussion. Questions? Regent Wingate?
I have some comments.
Okay.
Not really questions, but I'd just like to acknowledge the situation. And tuition and operating budgets are arguably the hardest and most public decisions student regions have to make. And this decision makes us do kind of a lot of soul searching on how we view our role on this board. And we have to reconcile our strong ties to our fellow students, many of whom are here, and the responsibility we have to everyone in the UW system. And so this is a decision that really hits home with me, and it's one that I've spent a lot of time considering. I am a first-generation college student, and I have had to find ways to pay for my own education. I understand the extra burden this increase would place on students, especially in these tough economic times. But I also realize that we are here today to find a responsible way to play the cards we were dealt from the state. When the state cuts hundreds of millions of dollars out of our budget, we are left with two choices: to charge more or do less. This budget does speak to the importance of access through hold harmless tuition fees and the tuition freeze at the UW colleges. But I know there is more we need to do to increase financial aid at our institutions, and I am committed to fighting this fight. But considering the economic situation we are in, these two access pieces go a long way. I would be so happy if at the end of this process I could say that the responsible decision was a freeze in tuition. But it's not as simple as that. There are consequences of voting no that some don't seem to address. I would have to figure out how many faculty positions I'm willing to let go, and how many student services I'm willing to cut, and how many seats I'm going to remove from the incoming freshman class. So I really believe that we have to make the hard balance between raising tuition and making cuts at campuses. There are really a lot of ways to look at this, and it gets complicated and subjective, but without including furloughs, in the coming year, under this budget, students will be covering 57% of the whole that state cuts made, and the rest will be coming from cuts at universities. And if you look over the 2-year biennium, students have covered around 45% of state cuts. You really can split this a lot of different ways, but the truth underlying all of these percentages is that students feel 100% of these cuts from the state. Whatever percentage doesn't come from a raise in tuition will come from cuts in their university experience. And so this is a painfully hard balance to make. So I do have reservations about this decision, but I can't vote 72% yes and the rest no. I know this is probably not a perfect budget, but from the best of the information that I do have, I believe this budget does do a reasonable job of spreading the burden of our poor financial situation among students, faculty, and programs alike. And therefore, I feel that this is the responsible way to move forward.
Thank you. Additional comments? Regent Schwalmer.
I also would like to echo some of the concerns that have been brought up by Regent Winged and say that this is obviously a very difficult decision in difficult times. And anyone who cares about the needs of the students, as we all do, will notice that we need to protect the resources and the quality of the education served, and that there is a balance between whether we are going to outprice some students, which would be very unfortunate, or if we're going to decrease the quality of the education that they can get if they can get here. And I feel that if we risk a greater loss, considering the efforts, if we can get the students here but cannot serve them well, because this might keep them from coming back in the future. This might have changed just a whole view about education for a whole family, maybe not just one person. And feeling both sides of this and totally agreeing that the students feel 100% of the losses here, because we are affected by both the cuts and the tuition increase. It's a very difficult decision to make, and considering the efforts to keep the increase modest, which has been shown by some of the statistic and data here today, and to protect the students of families below $60,000 per year, that those are all things that are coming into consideration that show that this board and others in charge are keeping the cares and the needs of the students in mind, even though it may feel to some of the students though that is not the case. Thank you.
Thank you. Regent Tribble.
Yeah, I negotiate contracts for manufacturing workers in this portion of the state for the United Auto Workers, and we are not negotiating 5.5% wage increases. Whatever wage increases that workers are getting are being pretty much eaten up by increases in health care costs. So it's difficult to look at a 5.5% tuition increase as being fair to the parents of our students, particularly working families. It's also tough, President Riley talked about sticker shock, and I know we've had a lot of things in place to protect low-income families, the hold harmless provisions, the grants, the Pell Grants, everything else. But we need to get that message out there because, you look at the headlines, it says Madison's going up, I think 638, and the other campuses are going up, and you wonder, okay, why is our best school going up the most? Is it becoming exclusionary? And it's really not because of the things that are in place, but we have to do, I think, a better job getting that message out. I think this budget and these tuition increases represent a thoughtful balancing act with the resources that we have and trying to maintain quality, affordability, and take care of our employees. I guess some other time in my life I probably would have been in the back holding a sign, but right now I don't see an alternative to this budget and this tuition increase, so I am supporting it.
Thank you. Other comments? If not, I'm sorry, Regent Wingan.
And I'd just like to say, I think we also have to see this decision as an opportunity for the people on this board and the administration members here and the faculty and the students standing in the back to work over this next year with the legislature to address the root cause of why we're having to do this today and why we're having to raise tuition so that we can stop, at least in part, the disinvestment from higher education that we have been faced with. And I think that's something that we should really try and come together for over the next year. So.
If not, if we are prepared to vote, I would like to, we're going to be voting on Resolution 2. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion is carried. Thank you. We now move to a beginning of a discussion of the biennial budget. And moving from the sort of the near-term decision about dollars and cents to a long-range strategic discussion about broad principles and priorities. As I mentioned earlier, the only action required here relates to our recommendation for HEAB and the amount of financial aid we think our UW students will need. Before we get to that action item, we'll have a broader information-only discussion about the growth agenda for Wisconsin. At the May board meeting, Ellen Chafee from the Association of Governing Boards led our discussion about strategic financing, aligning our financial decisions with our academic goals and highest priorities. Remember that our growth agenda goals focus on two main areas: more graduates for the state and more jobs, with a foundational activity related to our own competitive workforce. We'll talk more about the workforce issues tomorrow. For now, let me turn it back to President Riley to lead us through some of the big ideas related to the 2011-13 biennium. President Riley.
Thank you, President Pruitt. To begin with, I'd like to focus on the more jobs component and our efforts to stimulate economic development through academic research, our efforts to stimulate economic growth through academic research and development. Last year, I appointed a Research to Jobs task force to investigate ways that the UW system can better leverage R&D. That task force, which was chaired by Carl Branson, the head of WARF, completed its work and issued a report in September. Some of you will recall that the presentation that Carl gave to the board last September when we met on the UW-Whitewater campus. Following that, we convened an implementation committee to translate the recommendations into actionable measures and proposals. UW Staff Chancellor Chuck Sorensen agreed to chair that committee, I'm glad to say, and he's here today to present his group's report. So, Chancellor Sorensen. Is he here? He is right there. He is right there. There he is.
I didn't duck out. Well, thank you, Kevin. I appreciate the chance to, first of all, to chair the committee. It was an exciting thing to do, an important thing to do, and President Pruitt, thank you for allowing me to speak today. I also want to thank a few other people. I didn't do this alone. We broke the group into 3 subcommittees, and I'll talk about those subcommittees in a moment, but they're chaired by Brian Levin-Stankovich from UW-Eau Claire Chancellor. Brian's here, and I'll ask him to answer questions about his report. Kathleen N. Spinkin, the provost at La Crosse, chaired the entrepreneurship subcommittee, and Charles Haslett chaired the one on portals for the UW system. Also, we had good support from Doug Mill, Chris Frederick, Andy Richards, and they were the ones that did a lot of the compilation of the work. So it was a team effort all the way. We had full meetings on February 26th and April 13th, and then we decided to break it into 3 subcommittees. The emerging technology centers, the entrepreneurship focus on creating jobs, and then portals to share this information and provide access to our faculties. I would note, too, parenthetically, that what we're doing is not exactly new or local. It's a nationwide effort by state universities to become more involved in applied research, and there have been some national meetings conferences on the emerging research schools, and that's what the comprehensive are becoming more or less, and this is what this effort is. So we're part of a nationwide trend to focus more sharply on applied research that will create jobs. The subcommittees then held numerous teleconferences to conduct their business. The chairs of the teleconferences submitted their reports, which comprised the main sections of the final implementation committee report. The original task force concentrated on one form of emerging technology centers. The idea was to have one technology for each center that was developed, and to limit the number of industry partners in that process. For example, Stout could have been the technology center for emerging composites. But I think in the wisdom of discussion of the centers, the scope was expanded to include a configuration of resources brought to bear on the economic development of a region without prejudicing the type of organization or structure such as a center might employ. The focus should be on finding the most effective way to help a region's business and industry, and not simply one technology. And the goal ultimately is economic development. The principles established by the first subcommittee are create new jobs through research and development and technology innovation, add or retain jobs by strengthening existing businesses, funding should be available to existing centers and to new centers, to leverage multiple resources, public and private, and to contribute to economic development efforts in regions. The criteria for reviewing specific proposals are campus leadership must be fully committed, the faculty and staff must be fully committed, collaboration is essential with other campuses, technical colleges, or other institutions. The center leadership must have a track record of partnering with businesses, industry, or entrepreneurs. And students in all efforts must play a vital role. The infrastructure is addressed in the proposal, the full proposal, and they recommended strongly that a business model should be developed for the centers. But there are issues to deal with, there are obstacles to deal with, and this is, again, nationwide as these emerging schools look at how to do this. Faculty workloads in instruction, service, research, and advising are heavy. For the most part, at our schools, there are 12 hours of teaching, and if you add on to that expected research, that becomes a rather burdensome workload to bear. Where would you hold these centers? Buildings or leasing issues may have an impact on this. And caps on faculty overload earnings may dampen the effort to develop these centers. The final points on the first subcommittee on emerging centers, the committee strongly believes the centers, however configured, have to have a regional draw, and the cost is uncertain and will depend on the specific center proposal. The second subcommittee was entrepreneurship. The starting point, again, was the original task force recommendation, and they are week-long courses to teach basic business and entrepreneurial skills, UW System website for posting startup ideas and requests, a UW System business plan, statewide business plan for competition, UW Certificate Educational Program on Technology Transfer, and Wisconsin Entrepreneur in Residence Program and Wisconsin Tech Transfer CEO Replacement Program. The subcommittee soon found that the recommended initiatives were already underway either in other states or at a particular UW school. The subcommittee then conducted a series of conference calls with administrators of these programs. The subcommittee determined that each of the recommendations represented a valuable tool and a comprehensive strategy to encourage entrepreneurship, foster collaboration, and shepherd ideas and talent to the initial stages of development. Each recommendation addresses a gap in training, a missing resource that restricts the development of new businesses or breakthrough ideas, or a need to foster entrepreneurship among undergraduates and graduates. The various implementation steps or action items are contained in the committee's full report for each recommendation. The subcommittee recommended recommendations could be implemented with a mix of state support, in-kind support, or private resources. The final subcommittee was a discovery portal. The Wisconsin Discovery Portal is a web-based database now used to identify UW-Madison's faculty and certain staff with technical expertise. It provides the opportunity for industry to identify potential collaborators for sponsored research, consultants, campus resources, or facilities. The managing directors of WARF and WISIS agreed that the portal should be expanded to include faculty and experts at other UW schools. And other possible additions include the ability to search and sort by campus, technology transfer office contact information so people know who to contact, and a license-ready technology list for each campus. The implementation steps or action items are to designate a management team to lead the development and implementation and oversight of the expanded portal, to collaborate with WISIS on the expanded portal, and to recruit and hire staff to manage, administer, and market the portal. So those are the three subcommittees. The whole idea is to develop a more research-focused attempt at the state university, at the comprehensive universities, and to make sure they're focused on a regional basis and they focus on economic development. So the subcommittee chairs are here, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you may have about this report or about the subcommittee recommendations.
Could I just say, as the regents think about what questions or advice you might have, reactions, there are a number of other items that relate to research to jobs that I'll talk about in a few minutes, but we really would like to get your feeling on where we ought to go with some of these very thoughtful, I think, recommendations that Chuck and his colleagues have come up with based on the original research to jobs report, because we've got to figure out between now and the July meeting of this board on July 23rd how to come back to you with more detail and numbers on an initial proposal for the 11-13 biennial budget. We're struggling to figure out how we do that with a whole range of needs that we would like to address, and this is certainly one of them. So your advice, reaction to any and all of the recommendations here would be very helpful to us as we go about that work between now and July 23rd. So with that, let me open it up for questions or comments.
I'd add one thing, Kevin, that this is already taking place in some campuses. You already have had ideas to product to companies in some campuses, so it's not exactly new. Some have been involved in this for a long time. It's an attempt to, I think, create a process by which we all can participate in some kind of effort like this.
That's great. So Chuck's point was partly, don't tell us you don't like the things we're already doing. I said part of your point was don't tell us you don't like the things we're already doing.
Well, we're doing some of this. We're doing some of this, right.
No, there is a lot of good work along these lines going on the campuses already. Part of what we grapple with is, how do we, which of that do we want to put more investment in? How do we spread it across more campuses? How can we get where we want to spread it, the campuses to work together in regions, as Chuck said, to drive more of this kind of activity?
I would add one more thing, too. It's kind of a cultural change for a lot of campuses, because we have not been schools that have focused sharply on research like Madison has in Milwaukee. And this is a different kind of research. But so it will take support and a cultural change on most of our campuses.
questions, reactions.
Mark Bradley was on the committee. Maybe
Yeah.
I served on this implementation committee, and to me, it is going to require a cultural shift, but I think this is just part of the overall shift in emphasis of higher education as we deal with issues raised by us going further into the knowledge economy. As Shel Lubar pointed out this morning, businesses are interested in where they can get some of the expertise that only exists on our campuses. Some of the biggest supporters of the goals that we outlined initially in the growth agenda were members of the business community, talking about the quality of their graduates that we provide for them. Part of the quality in a knowledge economy for these graduates is for students to have firsthand experience on not only theoretical research projects, but showing how the research is going to be translated into answering questions that everyday businesses have in how they're going to manufacture things, how they're going to develop products. In my opinion, this is just part of the big sea change, and organizations and parts of institutions of higher education in other states are doing this and are a little bit ahead of us. Not a lot ahead of us, it seems, but still they've seen this a little earlier. And I was very enthused when Carl gave the initial report. I'm even more enthused now that we've got some of the recommendations for the implementation of that initial report. I think this is not, I don't see this as an optional use of resources. I think this is part of the essential use of resources for the undergraduate and graduate education, and also our obligation to extend some of our expertise to the citizens of the state.
I think all my colleagues would agree, too, that we're hiring young faculty who come with the expectation that they will do research, they will engage students in research, and that's what they want us to support. I'm going to ask my subcommittee chairs to add anything they want to, because they did the bulk of the work, quite frankly.
I don't see Kathleen here, but I think Regent Bradley's exactly right. I think our subcommittee approached this work on using that as an assumption that the role of all of our institutions is multifaceted and isn't simply a teaching role, because all of us are doing undergraduate research and sponsored research at varying degrees and levels. What we tried to do is put ourselves, I think, in the position of not our institutions, and we'll get a little bit away from that, but think about what is going to best benefit the state and how can we work as a system to do this. And that means that we all can't have our own this, that, or something else. That collaboration has to be built into this. And many of the proposals that have come forward in the past, I know Chuck and I have collaborated over the years, along with River Falls, along with CVTC, on our NanoSTEM initiative. We've got another joint proposal in this year to maximize the infrastructure that we don't really have as comprehensive. So we don't have massive technology transfer infrastructures. We don't have massive research office infrastructures, and so we've got to say, well, what does Stout have, what does Oshkosh have, what does Eau Claire have, and how can we make that work? We also wanted to make sure that we followed the model that's been the most successful in system-wide initiatives that I've seen, and that is a big idea driven really at the system level, but the application of that idea responding to local needs and being responsive to local needs. So we wanted to make sure we didn't have a one-size-fits-all definition of a center, that there was entrepreneurship training across the system, and that was built into and there was access for all of our faculty and staff and students to do that. And so the focus on regional responsiveness, the focus on the institution working with partners in business, industry, and the local economy to not only create new jobs, which was also, I think, a limitation that we were working with. But any of us in economic development agencies and working with our boards know that keeping businesses in a region is as much adding to that economy as getting some new businesses. And helping existing businesses grow is also a very important part of economic development. So to the extent that we can address any or all of those individually as campuses, we wanted to keep this rather open-ended, but yet also require some of these commitments that we put in the criteria for the system and all of you to be able to prioritize these proposals as they come forward on centers. A specific technology center may work in one place, may not work in another. We're not precluding that, but we're also not saying that's the only way to go. And so collaboration's built in, commitment on the part of the campus, engagement of students is an absolute critical part because that is our teaching role, engaging the students in the research that we can generate through these centers and through an initiative like this that ultimately is going to create jobs.
Regent Loftus.
You mentioned that you're going to bring this back to us. Yeah. Could you address, when you do that, the access to capital? At some point, you have research, you have an idea, it's proven commercially acceptable, and then what do you do? Say to the person, go find some capital. It seems to be the hard parts left to come here.
I think that's true, and that's a continuing challenge for the state of Wisconsin. A number of our institutions and chancellors have been central to starting some angel capital groups around, angel investment groups, and continue to participate in that. But you're right. In this realm, especially, the university has a part, a really significant part, but unless other chips are in place, we can't really do what we need to do either. So it's an important comment.
I noticed that some European universities, after being so far behind and even this being an idea, let alone a reality, have now gone all the way to the other side where they're operating their own funds. Now, they're getting their government's money to put in these funds, but they're operating their own funds.
I was at a meeting of the G8 University Group a couple of weeks ago, and a number of our European colleagues were saying that much of the research, as in this country, used to be done outside of universities there, but now they are being called on to do much more of this and trying to find ways to finance it as well. Regent Walsh.
I think this is a necessary first step, and it's certainly part of what our big message is the growth agenda and being a part of the solution rather than an expense on the balance sheet of the state. With any development of business, though, you start with ideas, good science, and then you have to have managers, people who can execute, and as Tom says, capital. What concerns me, though, is when we have good reports like this and great ideas, we also need to, in those reports, remind the decision makers, i.e. the legislature or even outside parties, that we need not only capital for a specific idea, but we need a fiscal note to keep the idea going. That is, to fund the data, the resource center, to fund the people that will continue to respond. Sadly, this is a great idea in the wrong time because we don't have the money for even that. So we should remind people that when they look back and say, well, that must have failed, it's really because we're in a bad time to do this. And so I think our report should remind everyone it still takes money to even be a resource, not the capital for the science, but a resource for the future. And that's really what we are, and we have to keep reminding the decision makers until somebody says, gee, that's a great idea, now it's mine, and I'm going to win an election with it.
The full report does have some recommended dollars with some of these recommendations. But I would add one thing. We do have a center at Stout, a very good center. I've had it for a long time. But it's a multi-supported center by the federal government, through NIST, by a private donor that gave us $2 million to underwrite our leadership for that program, extension money, state money, and our money. So if you combine resources, we've had that since 1992. Combine resources, you can make these centers work. So there are ways to do it.
Any other comments, reactions, questions? Yeah, Chancellor Wells.
One of the related to the issue about strategic financing. Remember we had that session, strategic financial planning, that Ellen did. The last session we had on strategic financial planning that Ellen did for the board. There are a series of, some of you probably heard about this, but of 3 economic summits that we're sponsoring but not in the lead because we want the private sector to stay in the lead in this. That'll be launched in Appleton, La Crosse, and finish in Milwaukee on October 5th. And the major objective of that group of people, these are people that you're all familiar with, the folks that did the Wisconsin Way, the Competitive Wisconsin, the WMC, and a number of folks like that. They're going to invite all 3 gubernatorial candidates to come to each of those to give them 10 minutes before them, and at the end they want to be able to hand off to the next governor, you know, a strategic finance plan for the state. And that's the focus. It's not just a matter of the scale of the deficit and the challenge of that, what has to be cut, what has to be protected, but how do we get enhanced funding for things such as Chuck's task force looking at. And so they've been talking about in these 3 summits, are going to go over some of the things other states are doing. Some of you may be familiar with Ohio is doing. They just passed, I think, $1.4 billion of bonding authority managed by the private sector to invest in a strategic initiative to get their economy going again. And it includes human capital, and some of the universities are involved with that there. And I think they're also looking at another several hundred million of bonding authority there. So hopefully this group will come up with something that says, you know, we can have all these great ideas, but if we don't figure a way out to fund them in a significant way without, quote, raising taxes, because that's not going to work in this environment, we're not going to get off a dime. So I would suggest we all pay attention and stay involved with that initiative. Maybe it'll work.
Thanks, sir. Anybody else?
Just,
yes,
if you could also just, I mean, there is a part of the state pension fund that's designated for investing in this area. It has a gatekeeper. I think that in finding out how that portion of the fund is operating and what the potential there is would be important. I really haven't seen any reports on the success of that part, and that legislatively mandated.
Good advice. We're looking for that. Yes, Regent Bartel.
I think Regent Welch is absolutely correct that unfortunately this is not a good time to push the button on this. On the other hand, having just approved a $2.3 billion annual budget, it seems to me in looking over the implementation recommendations that they are really, many of them are very modest expenditures in comparison to other expenditures that we have. And I think with the impetus of this report, I think it's important that we go forward at least modestly in some of these recommendations. I think it would be a terrible disappointment if this report just sat on the shelf and because we couldn't afford to fund it. I think we move it forward as quickly as we can with whatever resources we can pull together.
Thank you. We'll intend to do that, and this is a key part of the growth agenda. It has been from the beginning. We've got to pursue it at whatever level we can. Regent Bradley.
I just want to emphasize again, in this whole topic, it's very, very easy to quickly get into, oh, this is all about startups and the tremendous capital that is needed for startups. It is about startups, but it's also very, very much about applying using our expertise to help existing businesses, many of whom, most of whom, do not have the research and development resources that they've had from their suppliers, their manufacturers, their vendors in the past.
I think that's a very good point. You do default to that sort of entrepreneurial capital need, and that is only part of the story here. All right, well, given the hour, I think we better move on. Chancellor Sorensen, thank you very much. Brian, thank you very much, and the other people who helped chair the subcommittees. And we'll be back to you with a little more sorting through of these ideas as part of the biennial budget next time. We are running late, as I'm not surprised given the agenda that we have, but let me mention as quickly as I can a few other proposed initiatives which I think fit under the general category of creating more jobs for Wisconsin, and you have materials on these in your folders. At UW-Madison, a central tenet of the Madison Initiative is to add new faculty positions to eliminate course bottlenecks. You'll recall that. When those new professors are hired, they carry research responsibilities and expectations, and in fact, Chancellor Martin and her team expect that these new faculty colleagues will attract over $35 million in external grants. To conduct that kind of high-level research, attract that external funding, they'll need graduate assistants. While external grant funding will cover the direct cost of these assistants, these grants cannot fund the tuition waivers that are also required to attract top-shelf graduate students who can support cutting-edge research projects. At one level, this is part of the sort of infrastructure cost of this that Regent Walsh was referring to. So a budget initiative focused on this need would seek funding to cover the cost of those tuition waivers for 225 new graduate students. That's one of the pieces of this we're contemplating. And here at UW-Milwaukee, we are enthusiastic about the opportunity to fund Phase 2 of the 3 biennia research initiative. Phase 1, included in the state's 07-09 budget, you'll recall, provided $9.6 million and 60 new faculty and academic staff positions here at UW-Milwaukee to focus on research in areas in a kind of cluster hiring effort that Carlos and his colleagues have done in areas of biomedical and health technologies, advanced manufacturing, back to Mark's point about this is about our existing industries too, and other science and engineering fields. The end goal here is to strengthen the economic development in Milwaukee, all of southeastern Wisconsin, by enhancing this university's burgeoning research enterprise. Let me mention one other one that we may sometimes forget at our peril. The UW Library Research Commons initiative that we have on the table would increase access for students and faculty and staff to many core resources in a wide variety of areas. It would also support the expansion of existing electronic resources currently held by the UW-Madison libraries to all faculty and staff and students across the system, building the research capacity of the entire system. Our libraries have received no funding increases since 1999. With an average inflation rate of 9% a year, you can tell that significant cuts in research subscriptions have been necessary. So due to the lack of timely, accurate, and comprehensive scholarly resources, faculty and other researchers on many of our campuses have difficulty keeping up to date in their field and maintaining a competitive edge in acquiring extramural funding. So anything we can do in a very efficient way, I think, to invest in having resources move more easily electronically across our campus borders will help to drive this research to jobs effort itself. One or two more words on our other main goal, the more grads for Wisconsin. We'll need to consider what level of funding we'll need to begin there to improve access, the retention and graduation rates we've all been talking about, with that goal of increasing the annual number of graduates by 30%. Eventually, we want to reward performance by shifting funds toward UW system institutions that achieve their goals, their strategic goals in this regard. At the outset of this plan, as we're thinking about, again, the 11-13 biennium coming upon us, we want to incentivize the goals and strategies that the institutions have laid out in the initial phases of the plan to provide 80,000 more graduates by 2015. I won't go through all the things that they are thinking of doing, but I think you all recognize the importance of that. So, if you generally agree that these and the other materials you see in your folders are the right avenues, we'll get to work putting some dollar figures to them for discussion at our July meeting. But before we begin that discussion, I should remind you that we're also looking at really significant funding needs just to provide the high-quality education, the same level of educational access, the same number of well-prepared graduates, the same return on investment that we currently provide. Frida also mentioned the issue of the cost of fringe benefits. They go up. The cost of utilities go up. We have new debt service commitments for buildings that have been built that go up that we have to cover in the next biennium. In the current biennium, the 09-11 one, the one we're in now, for example, our UW system budget included $138 million to cover these fixed costs, and we expect that 2011-13 amount to be even higher. And here's an important number to keep in mind, I think. We will need $40 million in 11-13 just to take our faculty and staff back to where they were before the furlough cuts. In effect, to get them back to where they were 2 years before. It'll cost $40 million. So there are big-ticket items there in what we generally might categorize as cost to continue ongoing costs. And that $40 million, by the way, does not include the 2% pay plan that was rescinded as well. That would be well over $50 million if we had to cover that. So that forms the backdrop for any new requests that we want to make in 11-13. We'll, as we plan for the July meeting, we'll use some of the ideas that you generated in the May board discussion with Ellen Chaffee on strategic financing. Those ideas have been compiled. They'll be discussed at the institution's chief business officer meeting next week. We've got them divided up into things that the institutions can do, things that the system can do, and things that will require external help to be done. We'll keep you informed of which of those ideas kind of float to the top and get your input on that. So for now, I'd welcome your reaction to the broad ideas we've put on the table today, and I'd like to know if there's additional information you'd want between now and July 23rd or then, and maybe most importantly, I'd like your advice about the dilemma that faces us. We know we need significant new resources to preserve today's level of access and quality. Those current obligations have to be covered as we think about funding new ideas we have. At the same time, we clearly see the state's growing need for us to step up. We see an opportunity for the UW to address needs in a meaningful way for the state. We have ideas on the table that we believe strongly, and I think we've demonstrated already, can help grow the economy, can help create new jobs, can help push Wisconsin more quickly into the innovation economy it needs to be, can help provide that more educated citizenry that in an information age, a democracy just has to have if it's going to survive as a functioning democracy. So, how then do we balance all these needs in a budget proposal for a biennium in which it's fair to expect that the state and the nation will still be climbing out of the worst recession since the Great Depression? That's the simple question I'd like for you to answer today. And by the way, in a few minutes we'll be talking a little more about financial aid, our financial aid ask, and that's not part of our budget, as you all know. It's for the students, but it's another significant amount that we wind up asking the state for on top of all the other things we've just outlined. So how then do we balance all those needs in a budget proposal for the 2011-13 biennium? Thoughts beyond the ones you've already given us, which are helpful.
Alternatively, we could discuss who should be a future member of the Big Ten Conference.
That might be an easier discussion.
That might be an easier question to answer. Any questions, comments? Regent Loftus.
This idea of performance funding based on graduation rates, is that being seriously considered?
Well, I think we're at a point now where in our development of the plans, working with each of the campuses for this 80,000 new graduates by 2025, we have goals that are set out. And we'd like to work, as we form up the 11-13 budget proposal, around the goals that those institutions have put forward, because the goals won't have been met by the end of that biennium. They'll just have been started. But I think the conversation as we put the 11-13 budget proposal together will be based on how are you going to meet those goals and how are we going to shift funding over time for a successful reaching of those goals. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
I just want to say that I feel strongly about salaries at all levels in the system. I think it's very important that an emphasis be placed there in order for us to be the quality university system that we are now and that we need to be in the future.
Good. Thank you very much for saying that. We all share that. Regent Womack.
Mr. President, I was I recall last year, 2 years ago in 2009, when we looked at the biennial, and there was an item or some issue related to the library system and enhancing the library system so that research could happen at all the campuses. You just mentioned that again. I'm just wondering, is that the same one, or is that something different?
It did not get funded last time, if I'm correct. No.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Well, Regent Walsh.
I thought you were asking a question, and I just want to give my 2 bits. First of all, I'd like Notre Dame in the Big Ten. That's all I care about. I was struck by Mike Grebe and Shal Lubart, well, maybe Mike, it was Mike, talking about the luxury of arguing over a 4 to 6% double-year increase for faculty and staff. And the simple fact is that the world has changed, and we're now in tougher economic times, but there are people at this board, Mark and Chuck and myself, that we started with a $250 million cut in 2001. We backfilled that with tuition for $150 million. We've raised tuition, I think, 64%. The world is different, and we all want everything that's good. We want access for our students. We want financial aid. We want a faculty and staff that's paid reasonably so that we can maintain the faculty and staff we're so proud of. To me, our challenge is to not wait for the next blow or the next shoe to fall, but rather to raise the level of constructive dialogue around the state. And we have a great platform. It's called an election. And I would hope that we can not challenge so much as dialogue with the candidates, not just at this board, but hopefully around the state on each of the campuses and with the newspapers, and raise these questions so that at some point the decision makers have to make a decision before they're elected and tell us where they stand. And I'm sure they're all for everything we want. It's just how do you get there in difficult economic times? And I urge all of us to raise that dialogue and challenge them. And that this isn't political from our point of view, because I think we all want the same thing. It's just how do you get there, and let's talk honestly about it and what the price is that we're going to pay to get one thing and not another. So that's what we ought to be doing, I think, and that goes to each campus, not just this board.
Yeah. And that's well said, and we'll talk tomorrow about the competitive university workforce work, and Regent Spector, who co-chaired it, will tell us where we are there. I think that will be a very nice platform for the kind of activity you're talking about, and I think tomorrow Regent Pruitt will talk a little bit about our barnstorming plans to go around the state and using the work of the Competitive University Workforce Commission and some of the other work that we're talking about here make our case. So I think you're right on. Yes, Regent Smith.
So the 11 budget we are going to be talking about will presume the 80,000 additional graduates. That's going to be part of that.
Well, the first step, as campuses have proposed them, are in there, and then the question is going to be what kind of investment is the state going to be willing to make to help us start that ball rolling.
Right. So. And I would hope, I know we'll talk tomorrow, but I think it's important to start that dialogue, and the sooner that the Chuck and Kevin show gets going around the state, that would be, as assisted by other regions in the particular areas that you're traveling to, the better.
Very good. And chancellors, we're getting involved in this as well, which is great. Regent Spector.
I just want to add a process thought to go with the substantive points that have been made. I thought that Aaron's little comments were very good about, in effect, what we're doing all the time is balancing conflicting interests and competing interests. And our task, in a very macro way, is to take a look at that balance, if it makes sense. But I applaud you and the people you work with, because I think what you've done is to open the process up to the different points of view, like you've heard today. That the more those points of view can be made known from the members of the board, from the chancellors, from the general public, the more they can speak strongly about those issues about which they feel very strongly, the better decision we're going to make in the long run when we apply the final judgment and we make that final balancing. And I think the way you're doing it, of having these discussions, of encouraging people to
come forward with their ideas, of giving them real good looks, is the best way to make sure we make a good decision in what is a time of scarce resources, and nothing can be perfect. But I think that you're doing a great job of it, and the people that you work with on it.
Well, thank you very much, Regent Spector. And you go back to Regent Pruitt's putting that integrated budget planning chart up at the beginning that you've seen a lot of, but it really is a conscious attempt to provide the kind of opportunities for input that you're suggesting we need, so I hope it is working. But before we get to lunch, we have to do financial aid, folks. So we better move on to that. We need to think now about how much aid will be needed by our students in the 11-13 biennium, and specifically the Higher Education Aids Board. And by the way, Regent Bartel is your representative on that board, needs our recommendations so that they can form up their budget requests for the 11-13 biennium. So in this kind of longer-range, future-looking exercise, we're forced to make a lot of rough projections based on the best available data about our students' real financial needs. As you've already seen in your materials, these needs are significant. So to lead us in finding out a little more about that, and hopefully to your approval of the resolution, I'll turn it back over to Associate Vice President Frida Harris.
Hello. We'll try to run through the financial aid budget proposal, hopefully provide all the information that you need in order to make decisions about what we should do. For 11-13, our timeline that we're using as we work through is that we will at this meeting review the proposals and potential initiatives that we have out there. We do need a decision on the financial aid resolution so that we can send something to the Higher Educational Aids Board that represents your recommendations on the Wisconsin Higher Education grant. From June to July, we'll spend some time addressing questions that you have about specific initiatives, and then on July 23rd, we will have a special board meeting related to the biennial budget. On August 19th, you will have the board meeting on the biennial budget, so you'll have some time a month before to just ask questions, hear your own ideas from others on the board about where we should go and how we should move before you have to make a decision a month later. And then on September 15th, we have to submit our biennial budget. Why do we have to decide about financial aid? You've already discussed that. I don't need to go into it. However, we bring you information about the tuition increase grant, the AOP, the Advanced Opportunity Program, and the Lawton Program at the same time, so you can think about financial aid with the full picture of what the needs might be. We've got more students who are applying and eligible for aid. The number of students who are eligible for the state grant, the WAG, increased from 28,000 to 33,000 in 2009-10, so that was a significant increase there. We have some funding increases that have happened over this biennium, $619 increase in Pell in 2009-10, and an anticipated $200 increase in 2010-11 for the maximum. The Wisconsin Higher Education Grant is the primary state need-based grant program. It's budgeted within the Higher Educational Aids Board. It provides financial aid grants, and the need is determined using federal needs analysis, which includes income and assets and the number of dependent siblings enrolled in the post-secondary institution, among other factors. You can see that the funding for WAG has increased significantly from about $30 million to 58.3. I can't see it. That's a little bit far from me. In addition, you should know that the WAG program funding did not increase in 2009-10. However, we have a $3.3 million increase in the 2010-11 funding, and that's about a 6.1% increase. For this year, the 2009-10 year, there were about 7,400 students who were eligible for WEG but did not receive it. You should note that those students who were eligible didn't get the WEG, did receive the tuition increase grant, however. Providing the WEG grant to these students would have cost about $18 million. When we're looking at funding for WEG, there are different levels that we could consider. First is that the state statutes require the WEG funding to go up by the estimated percentage increase in tuition. And typically when we're doing an estimate, we look at the prior year's increase. Increasing the funding by the same percentage does provide additional funding as tuition grows. However, students lose purchasing power when it's on a percentage increase as opposed to using a hold harmless, which is what we're asking you to consider. So an example of that is looking at the statutory link. We can assume that a student received a WEG grant of about $2,300 in the 09-10 year, and that student is enrolled at a comprehensive institution. And if we assume that the awards go up by the same percentage that the appropriation goes up in the 2010-11 year, that would mean that tuition, as you just approved, would increase by $295, but the WEG award for that student would increase by $127. So you can see that there's a gap between the amount of funding that the student would get in the grant versus the amount that they would need based on tuition increases. Under a hold harmless, that same student would receive the $295 increase that happened at the comprehensive institution, or if they were at UW-Madison, they would receive the amount of the increase at UW-Madison or whatever campus they are in. So the proposal here is to seek funding to hold the students who receive a WEG harmless from tuition increases, and have those dollar amounts increase by the same dollar amount that the tuition is estimated to increase. And we are assuming in our estimates that the tuition is increasing based on a 5.5% increase. We are also asking to include funding in the proposal to add more students. Again, the expectation is we're going to add more students this year based on the changes in the formula, but we would also like to increase the number of students by 5% each year to help address some of those students who are waitlisted. And the cost of that proposal is about $43 million over 2 years. It's not 1 year, it's over 2 years of the next biennium. So we look at the options that we have. If we funded a hold harmless and we provided resources for all the students who are currently waitlisted, it would cost $64 million. And so that's about $21 million more than what we're asking you to consider, which is the hold harmless proposal at about 43. If we looked at just the statutory link, which would increase by the same percentage, wouldn't address the wait list, those things, you'd be looking at about a $10 million. So we're looking at the middle as an option for your consideration. The next thing that we're asking you to consider is the tuition increase grant. You don't have to make any decisions about the tuition increase grant, the Lawton, or the AOP today. Again, we're providing you that information just so you have a context of what the needs are in financial aid. The tuition increase grant we talked about previously is for students from families with income of less than $60,000 who have need and don't receive a WEG grant. Currently, the program, the way that it's funded, is limited to students, in the future would be limited to students who would be enrolled in the 2010-11 year because it didn't provide future funding. If we were to continue the tuition increase grant, which is what we're proposing, we would expand that program so new students who enroll in 2011-12 and 12-13 would also have access to the tuition increase grant, and the students who are currently enrolled could continue to be held harmless for those tuition increases. The cost of that would be about $17 million over 2 years again. With Lawton, Lawton is a state-funded retention grant program that resides in the university system budget. It assists financially needy sophomore, junior, and senior students of color, and it also includes a statutory link. So the funding for Lawton goes up by the same percentage that the tuition goes up for those students. We are recommending that you move forward with the statutory link and increase the funding by the expected percentage increase in tuition, and that would cost about $1.1 million. The Advanced Opportunity Program is a program for graduate students, economically disadvantaged graduate and professional students. Funding is included in the UW system budget as well. With the Advanced Opportunity Program, we are asking that the funding increase by the same percentage that the Lawton program increases. There is not a statutory link required for the AOP program, but the board typically would recommend that we move forward with the same type of a recommendation of $1.4 million. So that is the recommendations as far as the financial aid are concerned. Again, what we need action on today is the WEG program and what gets sent to the Higher Educational Aids Board. There is a recommendation included in your packet, a resolution to request the hold harmless for the WEG program. Any questions?
With the limited amount of resources that we have to fund these programs, has there been a discussion about whether it's better to fund more awards at a lower amount or less awards at a bigger amount? Like, has that been something that's been discussed, and what's been maybe the outcome of that? And will any of these increases in the award result in a decrease in the amount of the awards?
Regent Bartel could help a little bit there.
Okay.
I think you were told that I'm a member of the Higher Educational Aids Board, and as a member of that board, I raised that very question with the board over the last year or so. In response, the board created a task force consisting of members of financial aid members of all the segments, privates, techs, and the system, and that issue was the basic subject of substantial discussion. The task force is in the process of finalizing its recommendations, and I think at our next meeting we'll go over those. But I can tell you that in meeting with the system financial aid people, that the UW system has proposed a formula that will focus the aid more on lower or higher need students rather than spreading equally over the whole population. And part of that comes from the presentation that we received, I think last November, October, November, Dr. McPherson, who, you remember that presentation where he suggested that their research indicated that financial aid was more effective when focused on the lower SES, social economic strata, in getting those people across the finish line to a degree. So that is where this seems to be headed, and we'll have more to report on that, I think, at the next meeting.
Okay. Thank you, Regent Bartel. I kind of take the
No,
role,
go ahead.
sorry. But I just had a follow-up. So will any of the increases in the dollar amount that we're proposing result in any sort of decrease in the number of awards that are making the increases here? I mean, is that going to have any kind of effect, or are we going to have projected about the same amount of awards?
The increases that we're recommending for the WEG program, which is what you're acting on today, would actually increase the population of students by 5%.
Okay, so it would do both increase the amount of the award and increase the population.
Correct.
I just have a question going forward, Frida, similar to what Tom asked about the colleges, but in a different context. Have we looked at the effect of all this hold harmless stuff that we do on what it means in competing resources? And second, what are other schools doing in this way? I know the Eastern schools, the Ivy League schools had this at certain levels, and they've pulled back when their endowments went down. What are the public universities doing other than us with respect to the hold harmless concept, particularly the one you recommended that we not do the statutory, but we go beyond that to the full dollar amount?
Well, a number of institutions across the country have done programs where they have students who have income of a certain level will be fully covered for tuition. I mean, so that you'll see in specific institutions and in some cases in states where they have pulled together the grant programs plus the state aid, the institutional funds and private funds. I mean, a lot of this comes from private funds when they're looking at it. So they could say that if your income is $40,000 or $50,000 or something of that type of a level, that you would not have to cover any of that tuition out of your own family's funds. It would be fully covered under some type of a grant. This approach typically isn't found in a system, and so for us being able to say to students who have family incomes of $60,000 or less that at least you don't have to worry about the tuition increase. You will still get other grant funding, the Pell, the WEG program, and other things like that, but your increases in tuition would be totally covered by tuition increase grant is a new move for the UW system. Have we been able to measure the impact of that? We really haven't, because this is the first year that we've had it. 2009-10 is the first year of the tuition increase grant. The WEG program, although we have proposed a hold harmless for the WEG program, we have not received it. So the only thing we have at this point is tuition increase grant, and we haven't had the ability to measure it yet.
This gets convoluted as we talk through it. Frida, I need some numbers or I can't digest. And I'm sure they're in there, so maybe you can just... I need to know the WEG base in total for 9-10, 10-11, 11-12, 12-13.
Okay,
the
WEG...
harmless amount for those periods that we're, at least in the periods we're proposing, and the amount attributable to the 5% increase in participants so that we can come to a total amount so I know what I'm being asked to approve.
Okay.
Is that in there somewhere?
The specific breakdown of that information is
Just
not in the...
Just those three categories.
But I can tell you, the WEG base for the 2019 year was $55 million. The increase in 2010-11, the appropriation goes up to $58.3 million.
$55 million, 9-10.
Right.
So the base is still $55 million in 10-11?
It goes up to 58.3.
58 is the base.
Mm-hmm.
And then what is the hold harmless amount in 10-11?
I will have to turn to Chris again to provide that information because I did not bring it up here with me. Chris, can you come up here and address the increases? Specifically by year. And while we have this opportunity, I would like to say that, as you can see, I rely very heavily on the budget staff that we have in both the annual budget and the biennial budget, and it has been quite a bit of work to pull all this together. But Chris is our financial aid guy. Yeah.
Well, we're going to try. Let's put it that way. The total amount increases each year. As Frida mentioned, 10-11 we're at $58.3 million. For the WEG portion, for the hold harmless proposal, the total amount that's needed for both the 5% increase and the hold harmless component is $72.2 million, or a $13.9 million increase for 11-12.
Hang on.
Sure.
Let's stay with 1011 for a second.
Sure, 1011.
You get a 58.3 base.
Yep.
What's the hold harmless amount for 1011?
There is no hold harmless component for WEG in 1011. There was,
Okay, so
wasn't
it's zero. And is there 5% increase for 1011?
It's actually 6.1%.
And what's the dollar amount associated with that?
The 6.1%?
Yeah.
3.3.
3.3 million. Okay. So 1011 is 61.6 million.
No, 58.3.
For 1011, we're at 58.3. That's the 3.3%. We don't have a hold harmless component in 1011.
But
so
you have
what
a
we're
5%
looking,
increase in participants.
we are using the $3.3 million that we're receiving to increase the number of students who will get the WEG. So yes, that would be happening.
So am I right or wrong on my assumption? 58.3 base, 3.3 participant increase.
No, $3.3 million increase. The number of
The
participants...
3.3 is in the 58.3. Okay,
Right.
I'm with you.
Right, and we're expecting 1,800 additional students to get an award. At least that's our estimate for
Okay.
1011.
Now 11, 12, do you have those same breakdown?
Right, 11-12, we start with a 10-11 base of 58.3. You add $13.9 million to that, $13.9 million to that, to get to $72.2 million for the total base.
There's no 5%?
There's no 5%, there's no statutory link because we went for a larger amount.
So it's the 58.3 and the 13.9.
Right.
72.2. Do you have 12.13 or no?
12-13, we're asking for 15.2 on top of that to get to 87.4 million.
So 15.2 on top of the 72.2.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
This money's coming from a different source.
Right. The WEG budget, unlike the tuition increase grant, the AOP, and the Lawton program, the WEG budget is included in the Higher Educational Aids Board's budget request, which is why we have to do it now, because their board has to act on it prior to September.
So why wouldn't we ask for the most?
You could ask for the most. I think it's trying to, as we talked about, balance all the needs for funding that we have. You have the financial aid requests. We also have to look at the other initiatives that are being considered, which would be the more graduates, the research to jobs, if there are any things related to competitive compensation, how does that fall in there? And again, as President Riley mentioned, we still have to deal with the cost of just doing business the way that we are at this moment in time. The need to have additional $40 million of funding just to take care of getting our salaries back to where they are in addition to other things. So we were trying to, again, look at the options that we had laid out here as to funding all waitlisted, doing a hold harmless proposal, or doing statutory link, and thought that maybe going to the middle might be an option. But certainly, it's up to you to decide what you would like for us to present and move forward.
I didn't mean to be frivolous about that. If the money's not coming from us, from our budget,
right,
then it's up to WEG to decide what to give us, and wouldn't we ask them in the interest of our students for the most if it doesn't take away from our increased salaries for faculty or other things?
In theory, that would be the case. However, the way things are typically presented and the way that it was presented 2 years ago when we went through the same thing was funding for the University of Wisconsin. So when they look at funding for the University of Wisconsin and funding for UW students, they look at the financial aid that's being provided as part of what's coming to the UW. So while it's in another agency's budget, it does impact decisions about how much funding they will provide to UW.
And just to follow up, clarify, didn't I just hear you say that they didn't agree, WEG board did not agree to the hold harmless that we proposed the last time? So we're renewing our proposal but we may fall fate to the same thing that we experienced the last time on the hold harmless. I'm not putting negative out, but I think on the issue of do you go for broke or do you go for something that might be perceived as a little bit more reasonable, given that we didn't get reasonable last time, might be a consideration and a strategy.
And you're totally correct about that. We did propose it last time. One thing that should be noted, though, was that the governor's budget did recommend the hold harmless. Part of what came into the consideration there, as far as the legislature was concerned, was the increases in Pell, because there was that $600 increase in Pell in 2009-10, and the legislature said that would more than cover any tuition increase and therefore was not necessary. So
thanks for that clarification. I didn't mean to blame the board, so thank you for that.
I just wanted to thank the President for giving us air cover for this meeting. Do we have, can I ask if we may have a motion we can continue to discuss or question on Resolution 3C, modifying the WEG UW statutory language? Moved and seconded. Is there any additional discussion or questions?
So which one is it?
There's a resolution, and there are a lot of whereases, but the key is, be it resolved that the board requests that the statutory language of the WEG UW program be modified to provide that each student's WEG UW award will increase by at least the same dollar amount as the dollar increase in undergraduate tuition, thereby granting a dollar-for-dollar hold harmless increase to eligible University of Wisconsin system students. I believe that's the, if you will, the actionable step that we would be taking.
That is the 42.9.
Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed? This is agreed to. We have covered a lot of ground. We are now going to break, and I've been informed by the chair of the Education Committee, at least, that they have a very long and heavy agenda coming up. We have an all-regions session led by the Education Committee back here. Our hosts have graciously agreed to reduce the time for lunch from an hour to 45 minutes so that we might at least try to maintain a modicum of being just modestly late. So let me suggest that we would reconvene here at 1:30, and we're now going to lunch at the Golda Meir Library in the Sora Learning